Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilfred, good morning from both of us. Lots to update you on today.
Daylight strikes in Beirut this morning after Israel issued evacuation orders for 16 towns and villages. The IDF says it's targeting Hezbollah.
The war in Iran enters its fifth day, with the Israeli military saying it launched a broad wave of strikes in Iran overnight.
The strained relationship. President Trump lashes out at Sir Keir Starmer for his reluctance to help in the war.
So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme today. Well, as you just heard, President Trump didn't hold back last night when he attacked Keir Starmer for his reluctance to help America in its war with Iran. He said the Prime Minister is no Churchill, and he was not happy with the UK for not allowing the US to use its military bases from the beginning.
Keir Starmer isn't the only one. Donald Trump is even angrier with Spain, but it's got people questioning the strength of the so-called special relationship between the US and the UK. We'll discuss that in a moment, but first we wanted to bring you up to speed with the latest overnight action in the Middle East.
So people in Beirut, Lebanon's capital city, have woken up to fresh strikes after Israel's military issued evacuation orders for 16 villages. And overnight, Lebanese state media reported that several people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on a four-storey building in Baalbek, with rescue teams still working to pull people from the rubble.
Explosions were heard in Tehran overnight after Israel said it began a broad wave of strikes in Iran, targeting launch sites and aerial defence systems. It comes after the IDF claimed to have identified missiles launched towards Israel from Iran.
And Israel also struck a building linked to Iran's Assembly of Experts, reducing it, as you can see, to rubble. Clerics were expected to gather in Qom in south of Tehran to discuss options for the next supreme leader. Now, Iranian state media says that there was no in-person meeting at the time of the attack.
Well, the US State Department is urging non-emergency personnel and their families to evacuate Saudi Arabia and Oman due to safety risks. Yesterday's drone attacks hit Oman and Duqm's commercial port and the US Embassy in Riyadh.
And we're talking an awful lot about oil prices because the rise in oil prices has sparked a sell-off in the Asian markets overnight. So South Korea's market fell 11.5%, Japan's 4.3%.
The government has deployed the Royal Navy warship HMS Dragon to Cyprus after an RAF base on the island was hit by a drone over the weekend. British warplanes have also been involved in the Middle East, shooting down multiple drones over the sky in Jordan. So, look, an awful lot to update you on. We'll be bringing you all of those lines, of course, throughout the programme. And we'll also be talking to our correspondents in the region in a moment too, Jerusalem, Beirut and the Emirates as well. But first, let's just reflect a little bit on the spat that is emerging between President Trump and Keir Starmer. Here's what President Trump had to say in the Oval Office yesterday.
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Obviously, he's not happy, right, is he? I mean, I guess the one thing you would say is not just the UK. He's also even angrier with Spain, who have not just said that they can't use the airstrikes, their air bases for the initial strikes, but they can't use them at all. He's actually said he wants to kind of cancel all trade. Yeah,
so on Spain, he said, in fact, I told Scott, meaning Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, to cut off all dealings with Spain. We're going to cut all trade with Spain. So, as you say, going a lot further, potentially taking actions against Spain, not just issuing rhetoric against the leader, which was obviously what Keir Starmer received yesterday. Everyone's responding to this, I think, today as all of the whispering, Trump whispering that Starmer did was for nothing. I slightly look at it the other way round, in that Keir Starmer, the UK, has clearly done something that's really upset Trump, and yet all he got back was he's not Winston Churchill, unlike what the Spanish seemingly are getting in response. And, you know, there's probably been a lot behind the scenes between the decision, you can't use the bases at all, now you can use them for something, a lot of behind-the-scenes messaging. And you know, as things stand, and we can't judge the relationship after one day, very hard to judge what Donald Trump's thinking at any point in time, let alone immediately after he says something. You know, the proof will be in the pudding in weeks or months if there are tariffs added to the UK or if our trade deal breaks down. But you know, that hasn't happened yet in light of a very contentious issue. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, I think we're keen to get your views on it as well, because I think there'll be some people who think, you know, Donald Trump threatening trade sanctions and economic consequences for countries who don't back up or don't agree with the legality some of his military action, controversial.
I think there's no doubt in the short term this helps Keir Starmer domestically. I don't think anyone likes seeing their leader, whatever side of this debate or any debate you're on, being criticised like this publicly. I think we saw it play out with Zelensky, obviously. So I think it plays well for Starmer in the short term. I think the bigger question long term, obviously, as we discussed with Deborah Haynes at length yesterday, is if we rely entirely on the US militarily, which I think most people would say, Deborah Haynes would say we do, then can you consistently stand up to the US on military issues? And those two things long term don't really fit, but in the short term, I thought really interesting developments yesterday.
Right, let's bring in our correspondents, shall we? Our international correspondent John Sparks is in Beirut for us this morning, Sally Lockwood in Dubai. But first, let's speak to Diana Magna, who's in Jerusalem. And Diana, we have seen an awful lot of strikes overnight from Israel. What happened?
Yeah, well, the US-Israeli relationship is certainly still going strong, Sophie. The IDF just said that they have been targeting Basij and security command centres in Tehran overnight, continuing their attacks on Iran's missile capabilities, on their launchers. And just to reiterate, we have really seen a lull in the intensity of Iranian missiles and fire coming over towards Israel in the last 24 hours. We had one siren this morning. There have been sirens across Israel, but it just feels significantly less than what it did in the first 24 hours of this war. Interesting statistics, too, from the CENTCOM, commander of Central Command, US Central Command, late last night, saying that the Americans had dropped 2,000 munitions on 2,000 targets in Iran, and that the intensity of the first 24 hours was almost double the scale of Operation Shock and Awe at the start of the 2003 invasion. And I guess that really is having an impact on Iran's capabilities, especially when they have such a wide spectrum of countries that they are targeting, not just Israel, but also, obviously, all across the Gulf. Donald Trump had a lot to say yesterday. Two things to bring you that I think are particularly important this morning. One was a reassurance in the energy war that we're now seeing to shipping in the Gulf region that America would do its best to provide insurance for any kind of ships from wherever they are who are transiting the Gulf region, and also that he would provide a US naval escort to ships that need it, that are trying to get through the Straits of Hormuz, because Iran had said that they would set on fire any kind of shipping going through those straits. So that is obviously an attempt to reassure global energy markets as countries across the world see energy prices spiking. And also interesting comments that he had on a potential leader in Iran. You know, we've seen the language around regime change shift. It seems to be sort of going down the list of objectives from President Trump. He said that he would prefer to see a leader from within the country, which I think will come as a blow to Reza Pahlavi, who I think has been doing a lot of lobbying with President Trump. And he also seemed to suggest that it would be better to have some kind of leader, certainly a moderate, who and keep some of the security structures intact. He said we don't want to see what happened in Iraq, when the entire security structure of the Ba'athist Party were basically got rid of entirely. I don't think that is going to provide any kind of reassurance to those people who took to the streets earlier this year demanding an end to the regime in its entirety, this deeply entrenched regime. He also said that basically America had got rid of any of the leaders that they knew at this point. Also worth bringing to your attention, Israel's defense minister saying that any new leader that they do appoint would be a target for assassination if they continue with their policy of death to Israel.
Diana, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's go to John in Beirut. John, what is the latest there? We've seen some of the pictures overnight in the early hours. Hopefully you're far from some of those explosions, but no doubt have been able to hear them.
Morning, Wilfred. Yeah, not that far, actually. It's been a very lively morning here in Beirut. I think what we're witnessing is a real escalation, a real intensification of the conflict here. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We've been listening to Israeli fighter jets circle above us, the sort of dull sound, dull roar, and also to some pretty loud bangs as well, including one bang that took place about an hour ago, not too far from here. It was at about the same time that the IDF released a evacuation order for a neighborhood called Hadath, which is about 2 or 3 kilometers from here in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Those suburbs have been taking a pounding over the last couple of days. The Israelis also hit a hotel in eastern Beirut, a predominantly Christian neighborhood there. So again, I think it shows that the conflict here is moving into new places, new parts of the country. On the topic of those evacuation orders, which the Israelis do release, and they've released about 24 of those this morning. Sometimes they do. Sometimes local residents get these warnings, and sometimes they don't. And in the cases where they don't, it's generally the view that the Israelis are going after particular people, particular targets, to take them out, to assassinate people. The problem with that policy is that people who live nearby, they don't receive those warnings either. And I think that's one big reason why large parts of this country, in southern Lebanon, in the southern suburbs of Beirut as well, they've been emptying out. People have been getting out. They're looking for places to live. They've got a lot of people living out in the open as well. And it has very quickly become a national crisis here.
John, thank you so much. A lively morning, kind of classic John Sparks understatement, I think, there. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's go now to Sally Lockwood, shall we? Who's in Dubai for us. Sally, you're in Dubai along with, tens of thousands of Brits, many of them there on holiday, of course. What's the latest that you can tell us?
Yeah, well, in John's language, Sophie, it's been a rather lively night here. We've seen American air bases and infrastructure targeted across the region in the last 5 days. And overnight here in Dubai, it was the American consulate that was hit in a drone attack in a built-up area of Dubai's old city. Videos emerging and circulating very quickly, showing a big explosion, people gasping in shock as they filmed it on their mobile phones. We had air raid sirens here in Dubai, as well as the UAE, more emergency alerts and more thuds of air defences intercepting missiles and drones overnight. We're getting quite used to these noises, but certainly people here are very unnerved. Regarding the US consulate hit, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that all staff have been accounted for and that no one was hurt in that attack. And the American advice to their citizens in the UAE is to leave if they can do so safely, and if they can't, then to shelter in place. And the British embassy updated their travel advice for the tens of thousands of British tourists who are stranded here, as well as the 250,000 British citizens who live here. And overnight, their advice was changed to, if your presence here in the country isn't essential, you may wish to consider leaving if you judge you can access these options safely. And indeed, the first British repatriation flight is due to leave tonight from Oman.
It's quite complicated guidance, isn't it? Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you from Dubai. Well, as referenced, of course, there are some repatriation flights that are beginning, and in particular, one's been commissioned to come from Oman this evening to get British nationals home. The flight will depart Muscat at 11 p.m. local time and prioritise the most vulnerable. Emma Birchley standing by at Heathrow Airport for us. Emma, have we, I guess, over the last 24 hours started to see some of the people that Brits have been based in the Middle East get home despite significant reduction in air travel to the region.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the airspace remains closed, but people are finding a way. But this is the first chartered flight by the government. So it will leave at 11 p.m. from Muscat in Oman. They want to help the most vulnerable first, and they are urging people who registered with the UK government in the United Arab Emirates to make it clear by filling in a form that they are now in Oman. It's a 4.5-hour drive from Dubai to get to Muscat Airport. They want people to not go unless they have been contacted and told that they are definitely on that flight. But people have been getting home. So in particular, existing passengers with Emirates, there have been flights coming here. Now, these are not scheduled flights. It's been made clear that those have been suspended until midnight tonight at the earliest. But we know that there's a flight due to arrive in about an hour into Heathrow, another one later this morning. There's one coming into Manchester around now, another one into Birmingham. So existing customers are having that option, and British Airways too, although they're not operating out of Dubai or any of that part of the region. Oman, where the airspace is open, they are organising a flight out of Muscat, which is due to depart at 10:30 tonight on a first-come, first-served basis. But you have to contact BA, you have to know that you are on that flight before travelling to the airport. So there are still many, many, many people who are stranded who want to get home. There are, of course, holiday makers, but there will be people who were in Dubai, for example, in transit or on a stopover, maybe been on holiday in Thailand. So there are plenty of people still wanting to get home, and a great deal of uncertainty, and that is what is coming clear when you hear from these people that they are in many cases not getting a lot of information. There is a great deal of uncertainty, a great deal of cost involved. Passengers, for example, paying for their own taxis from Dubai, a 4.5-hour journey to Muscat. So lots still to be resolved here.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. Virtually speaking there from Heathrow Airport, an awful lot of people, of course, really hoping to get a flight back to the UK. Now, the spring forecast happened yesterday, overshadowed, really, I think even our next guest would probably agree, by the events on the global stage. But we are joined now by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray. Great to have you with us. I just want to ask you, if I may, about Donald Trump's comments first, because he kind of gave it to Keir Starmer a bit, didn't he? He said he's not happy with the UK and this is not Winston Churchill we're dealing with. What's your reaction?
Well, look, as the Prime Minister has said, President Trump has expressed his disagreement with the decision that we took over joining the initial offensive strikes in Iran, because we decided not to do that. The Prime Minister was very clear that wasn't in our national interest to join those initial strikes. What's obviously happened now is that the Iranians have responded, and it is absolutely the right thing for us to do, and the Prime Minister has made this clear, to join defensive actions to protect British nationals in the region and to allow the US to use our bases to take out the Iranians' missiles and their missile launches. So, our position on this is clear, and President Trump has expressed his views. Yeah,
he has. He certainly has. He's been even tougher on Spain. He says he's going to cut off all trade over their decision not to allow the US to use their bases. Are you comfortable with the president, using economic sanctions against countries who might not agree with his international policy?
Well, look, President Trump's relationships with other countries is for him and those countries to deal with.
Yeah, but we can set out. Right?
Well, we can set out what our view is on the substantive matter here and the substantive decisions that need to be taken. And what's happened over the last week is that there was a decision about whether we join those offensive strikes, the initial strikes, and the Prime Minister decided and took the right decision not to.
Understand that.
And then decided to join the defensive action to protect British nationals.
I understand. I guess it's just, from the kind of armchair, it's slightly surprising. You hear Donald Trump say, Keir Starmer's no Winston Churchill. You hear him criticising the Spanish. He said all this while, sitting next to the German Chancellor. He could have stuck up for us a bit, couldn't he?
Well, look, I think people know that words will be said, phrases will be used, but what's important is the relationship between the US and the UK. And if you think about it right now, the US and the UK will be working together on these defensive actions in the Middle East. We will be sharing intelligence as we do 365 days a year. That relationship between the US and the UK is strong, is historic, is long-lasting, and the basis of our security.
Can I talk to you about what I think a lot of our viewers are going to be worried about this morning, which is the cost of living and any impact that the war in Iran could have on that? Oil and gas prices are going up. Wholesale gas prices for the UK up 98% in the last 2 days. Are you worried?
Look, I can understand because people have been concerned about the cost of living for a long time. So when people see what they do on the news, they will wonder, what does this mean for us? Now, what I would say is firstly, it's early days in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. Obviously, we're monitoring it very closely to see what happens. But what I would also say to people is that look at what we've done already to make sure people are in a stronger position when it comes to the energy bills, when it comes to the cost of living. So £150 coming off energy bills as a result of decisions the Chancellor took in the autumn budget. That means the price cap comes down on the 1st of April. That price cap lasts for 3 months, so that puts more money in people's pockets and helps protect people from any shocks that might come our way.
I don't want to sniff at £150 off energy bills, right, because that is welcome news for people, certainly. But I guess my point is that this could kind of be dwarfed if these prices keep going up. I mean, you can see the gas prices there, up 90% in the last 2 days. If you look at, the energy price guarantee back in 2022, that cost £150 billion over 2 years. I mean, this is, I guess, is what I say. Like, £150 off bills now is great, but people are worried about what could happen if there is this sustained rise in energy costs.
And what I would say to people is that it's early days in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. We're all very concerned about what's happening, and as a government, we're monitoring it very closely. But it is early days, and in terms of how people will experience their energy bills in the immediate future, they will see that reduction come through via the price cap on the 1st of April. And of course, the wider points which were raised by the Chancellor yesterday in the spring forecast point to inflation coming down, interest rates having come down a lot, which feeds through into mortgage bills that people pay, so that helps people with the cost of living as well. Rail freezers, prescription freezers, all of the stuff which helps people with the cost of living.
On those things, because you're right, Rachel Reeves talked an awful lot about inflation in the spring forecast. In a way, I think it's quite brave for this government to peg your success so much on what happens to inflation, which can be influenced by global affairs. I mean, Rachel Reeves, our plan is the right one. Inflation is down, inflation has fallen. Keeping inflation low and stable as possible is the best way to support family incomes. So if you're taking credit for inflation coming down, will you take responsibility if it then goes up?
Well, we know that some of the actions that we've taken directly help to bring inflation down.
The question is, will you take responsibility if it goes up, if you're taking credit for it coming down?
Well, we are taking responsibility for the decisions that we've taken, and we are saying they will have an impact on inflation in a good way. Well, no, let me just set this out, Sophie, because if you look at the decisions that we took at the budget around energy bills, rail fare freezes, prescription freezes, and so on, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the Bank of England, they all say this will feed through into lower inflation. Now, of course, there are global factors. Of course, there are global factors at play as well. And the Bank of England is responsible for setting interest rates, and so they determine how they respond to inflationary pressures. But the government does have a role here. And if you look at what we did in the budget last year, that will feed through into lower inflation.
OK, well, I'll come back if inflation does end up, going up, particularly because of global affairs as well. I want to talk to you about growth, if I may too. The ABR downgraded growth this year, 1.1% down from 1.4%. I know that it ticked up slightly in the next 2 years, but it's still pretty low by historical standards. Before the election, Keir Starmer announced 5 missions for the government, and the first was to secure the highest sustained growth in the G7. Is that still your aim?
We're still committed to aiming for that. And look, if you look at what happened last year, we had the fastest growing G7 economy in Europe.
Now, that's different. That's so different.
No, I'm pointing to the fact
that
it's
it's really different.
I'm pointing to the fact that
I know I am going to come in here. I'm sorry, because It does feel to me really, really important that it feels to me like the government is deliberately changing the form of words around this pledge. I mean, it was on the pledge card, it was on the missions.
No, sorry, but I'm not
Rachel
saying...
Reeves said the same thing. Last year we had the fastest growth of any G7 country in Europe.
No, but
that wasn't one of the missions.
Hang on. What I'm not saying is that it's job done from our point of view.
Yeah, it's definitely not job done.
I'm not saying,
I'm
not saying that we've done everything we need to do or want to do in terms of getting the economy growing, in terms of getting more money in people's pockets. What I am saying, and what Rachel was saying very clearly yesterday, is that we have the right plan. We're moving in the right direction.
Is when you go into an election saying your mission is the fastest growing economy in the G7 and people vote for you, potentially on that basis, you cannot then just wash your hands of it and just add 3 words at the end and hope that nobody notices. That's not OK.
But that's not what I'm doing, right? So that's not what I'm doing. What I am saying, what we've always said...
So is it still your mission to be the fastest G7?
Can I just finish this point? Because we stand by, that is our commitment. We want to aim for that. But we know that change takes time. We know that change takes time over the course of this Parliament. We know that things are not going to happen overnight. And what the Chancellor set out yesterday is that the direction of travel is the right one, that we have inflation down, borrowing down, debt interest payments down, investment up, business confidence up. All of those are essential conditions for growth. And so that's why we are confident going into this year and the years beyond that we'll be able to beat the forecasts because we have those essential components of growth. And that is why we're confident we have the right economic plan.
OK, thank you very much indeed. James Murray speaking to us there. We're going to have more coverage of the conflict in the Middle East coming up. We'll be talking to Britain's first ever National Security Advisor, Lord Peter Ricketts.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. The US President has delivered a stinging attack against the Prime Minister, calling him no Winston Churchill when asked about relations with European leaders. I'm joined now by Lord Peter Ricketts, of course served as Britain's first national security advisor, 2010 to 2012. Very good morning to you, Lord Ricketts. Good to see you.
Morning.
My first question before we get to the special relationship angle is whether you have any predictions on how long this conflict will last, if there are any off-ramps that could be taken soon, or do you think this will persist?
I mean, at the moment, it's still expanding. I think the curve of the war is still upwards, and I can't yet see the plateau or the de-escalation towards a ceasefire. And the Iranians have done exactly what we all expected in wargaming an Iran crisis. They've no match for the air power of the Americans and the Israelis, so they're doing an asymmetric attack on the Gulf oil installations, Straits of Hormuz. They're bringing the world into the crisis. Predicted and predictable, and yet I don't think the Americans and Israelis have an answer to it. So right now, I don't see the de-escalation coming.
Is there a risk that they have a sort of saving the best for last type approach, weapons that could cause much greater regional damage than we've seen thus far, or not?
I think they're probably holding back some of their most sophisticated missiles, yes, but they've also got huge stocks of drones. And if we're in a game where $1 million air defense missiles shoot down $1,000 drones, that is not sustainable in the longer term, either for the Israelis or the Americans.
Let's touch on the relationship between Trump and Starmer. How significant was yesterday in terms of the cooling of the friendship between the two men?
Honestly, I don't think we should stress too much about one throwaway comment from Trump. When he's annoyed, he reaches for the most wounding thing he can think of saying. It's crass, it's completely unfair, given that the UK is doing more to support the Americans than any other European country. There are no American planes taking off from German air bases to strike, and yet Merz seemed to get the credit in the White House yesterday. British planes are intercepting missiles around the Gulf, Germans are not. Chancellor Merz was at the table, therefore the President was schmoozing him. Honestly, I think this will blow over. I think when Trump learns what Britain is actually doing, things will return. I mean, in the secret of this studio, the special relationship has always been more special from the UK side than from the American side. But the two militaries, the two intelligence communities, I think, are still working very closely together. So I wouldn't worry too much about one throwaway comment.
So how do you rate Keir Starmer's handling of everything the last few days?
I think he's done well. I mean, I agreed with him about not being part of the initial phase. A military campaign where you can't articulate a political objective or how you get there or what the exit strategy is a dangerous one from day one. And there was no way British ministers could have justified joining in the initial attack. There was no legal base for it, let's say that absolutely clearly. But then when the attack started on the Gulf, I'm sure the Gulf states were coming to London and saying, for heaven's sake, you must do more to try and protect us. And at that point, I think Keir Starmer accepted that going after the missiles that were being fired at the Gulf was just about at the edge of what we would regard as lawful. So I think he's handling it well, but I'm really worried that I don't see at the moment how this war ends.
Where do we stand? I mean, over time, obviously, militaries, in terms of capability, increase and decrease. Where is our relative reliance at the moment on the US military compared to moments over the last sort of recent decades, particularly in the region itself? Do we very much rely on the US?
I mean, of course, we don't have anything like the scale of the US, and a lot of our military equipment is intentionally dependent on working with the US. We assumed, I think not unreasonably, that that alliance would continue for the foreseeable future. So our nuclear deterrent, we depend on the Americans for the missiles. Some of our fighters, the F-35, depends on American software code. And so, yeah, we are deeply intertwined with the Americans, and we don't have the mass and the scale to do as much in the Gulf as we might have been able to do in previous decades. Remember, we're also at work in protecting Ukraine. At the moment, nobody's talking about Ukraine, but for every Patriot missile fired in the Middle East, that's one less that's going to be available for Ukraine. So we are having to manage both theatres. Yeah, we are pretty thinly spread, I think would be fair to say, in the Gulf. Interesting that the first warship is being dispatched now to provide air defence for Cyprus. That shows that how thin we are in terms of the assets we have.
So what should be the reaction to this? I mean, is it sustainable to continue to be that thin, to continue to rely so much on the US, if these little spats, even if you downplayed them, do arise? Do we have to make a marked change in strategy or not?
I don't think these little spats, as you call them, the odd comment in the Oval Office, is going to affect the deep security and defence relationship that we have. But yes, I think this war underlines once more that we've got to ramp up defence spending quickly. We are caught short. And the world is not going to get any more calm in the coming months and years. So I think it's really important now the government spends more, spends smartly, and that we learn the lessons from Ukraine and now also from the Middle East on the importance of drones and of a completely networked military. And we've got an awful lot more to do to get to the kind of resilient place we need to be in that new world.
Lord Ricketts, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Now, Iran has launched retaliatory attacks across the region, including on its allies, which host US military bases. It sent armed drones, cruise and ballistic missiles, and fighter jets. But the price of defending against these attacks can be as much as 30 times what it costs for Iran to launch them, something that Lord Ricketts was just referencing. Here's Tom Clark's explainer.
All wars are expensive. But are the costs of America's attack on Iran financially and logistically unsustainable? Take a look at this. This is Iranian state-affiliated media showcasing vast stockpiles of low-cost but highly lethal Shahed drones. In response to America and Israel's attack on Iran, the regime launched hundreds of these against its attackers and their allies. But there's a huge mathematical mismatch between the cost of Iran's weapons and those used to defend against them. Take the UAE, for example. It's had amazing success in thwarting Iranian missile and drone attacks, claiming to have downed more than 90% of those fired at it in the first 3 days of the conflict. But a Shahed drone costs between $20,000 and $50,000. The missiles used to intercept them between $500,000 and $1.5 million. One analyst estimating it could have cost the UAE up to $750 million to thwart an attack of around 500 Shahed drones. That's 20 to 30 times more than it cost Iran to launch them.
The math clearly favors Iran in this strategy of attrition because they just have, we don't know exactly how many, Shahed drones they might have in their stockpiles, but it's much larger than the combined total of the stockpiles of interceptor missiles that are available. We're now seeing sort of a race between Israel and the United States trying to locate this drone infrastructure, to try to destroy it, to reduce the pressure on these interceptors, versus Iran trying to keep it an active threat.
The UAE says it's got plenty of missile stockpiles to continue to defend itself. But it's been reported that America's allies in the Middle East are desperately trying to replenish their supplies of mainly US-made missile interceptors. The question is, will they be able to do that, given it looks like America may well be running out of ammo too? Take Tomahawk missiles, very effective and very expensive, being launched here from warships off Iran. It's estimated the US military's deployed up to 400 Tomahawk missiles to the Middle East, but that represents 10% of the 4,000-strong US arsenal. Stockpiles of THAAD missiles are thought to be seriously depleted too. America reported launching around 150 of them in its 12-day war with Iran in June last year. That represents about a quarter of its 600-plus stockpiles of that weapon.
We are using these interceptors at a rate that's much faster than you can possibly replace them. The problem is that increases your long-term strategic risk, particularly in other theaters.
America, of course, can always withdraw from the Middle East once it's run out of weapons, but analysts warn its peer adversaries are watching. If America depletes its arsenal through campaigns like this, what power would it have to deter Russia or China if they decided to lash out too? Tom Clark, Sky News.
A fascinating report, particularly, when there is such pressure on the UK over defence spending, the importance of showing, I guess, where that money is spent.
Yeah, and the need to innovate and get the more modern technology in drones in particular. Let's have a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The south and east look mostly fine into next week, while northern and western parts will see rain at times. There's already a little rain for parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland and Scotland, but most other places look dry. England and Wales will see early low cloud and fog slowly lifting this morning to leave plenty of sunshine by lunchtime. The East Midlands, the Welsh Marches and southwest England will remain grey the longest. Elsewhere, it's going to be rather cloudy with patchy rain becoming confined to Northern Ireland and western Scotland.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
We just want to show you live pictures now from Beirut. Sorry, it says live, it should be latest. These are the latest pictures from Beirut. You can see there a big explosion happening in the capital of Lebanon. I should say that this is just one of a couple of explosions that we have already seen happen there this morning, and you would imagine this is all part of the ramping up of Israel's operations in Lebanon.
And it is almost live. We can switch to the live picture. That explosion took place whilst we were doing the weather, so it gives you an indication of just how recent and how developing this is. That is now the live picture. We'll be back out live in Beirut with John Sparks later in the programme. Of course, an ongoing military situation in the Middle East. We'll be right back.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Welcome back. Well, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, of course, delivered her spring forecast yesterday, but it was against the backdrop of everything changing around her, given in the war in the Middle East. We're joined now by Carsten Young, who's the head of macroeconomics at the Institute for Public Policy Research. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. If we can, for one question, park the situation in the Middle East, what changed yesterday? What significantly stood out for you, or was it more of the same from the Chancellor?
Well, this was the fourth fiscal statement by Rachel Reeves, and she promised in advance of getting into power to stabilise public finances and bringing stability. And it feels like this was the first budget that was really calm and had arguably very much stabilised markets since the November. So there was this worry that the UK borrowing costs were much higher and had increased much more than those of other countries over the last 1.5 years. But this spread against other countries has now come down. So arguably, the bigger story is that in November, the autumn budget delivered the sort of stability and calm that Reeves had previously outlined. And so basically, the good news yesterday was that there wasn't much news on the forecast. There wasn't any need to adjust taxes or spending because borrowing costs had in fact come down more than was previously expected. So she even had a bit more headroom against her fiscal rules. So the Iran crisis aside, this was basically a no news is good news story.
I mean, if you see it as almost like a kind of vindication, the spring forecast, isn't that a bit of a problem given what is going on elsewhere, right? Because she's talking about inflation coming down, she's talking about stability, but it feels pretty precarious at the minute, right?
So it's absolutely very precarious, and we don't know where energy prices are going to go. But she has a buffer against her fiscal rules of a bit more than 20 billion. So this buffer we have for exactly the kind of crisis we might see now that could be used, for example, to support people more with the cost of living. And so having this fiscal headroom, having this buffer is exactly the kind of thing that you want to have going into this crisis. That said, of course, we really need inflation to come down so the Bank of England can cut its interest rates. We actually know that cost of living interventions can help with that. So one thing that Rachel Reeves should consider doing more of is these energy price interventions that have been tested in Europe and in the UK during the previous energy crisis. So really looking at not getting inflation out of control.
This is it, though, slightly, because you say that she's got a buffer of 20 billion, like the energy price intervention from the Conservatives. What was that, 150 billion? I mean, that 20 billion, could go quite quickly.
Sure. So so far, the shock is much smaller than we had in the Ukraine crisis. We also have other tools that could probably be more targeted now than there were previously. But yeah, absolutely. If we get a very, very big energy shock, the headroom buffer might have to be used up. But again, fiscal rules are for normal times. If it's a crisis, then the UK isn't at risk of being insolvent. So we could borrow more outside the fiscal rules and then come back to them in normal times.
Just give us a snapshot. If oil prices keep rising, is there a trigger level that really worries the UK finances, or a trigger amount of time of oil prices staying elevated?
So the one key thing to watch is the energy price cap. So consumers are insulated from April to June because the energy price cap has been set. The big question is, will energy market disruptions continue so long that they will affect the next cap, which starts in July? And I think that this will be the key pressure point. And that's also the point where potential policy could think of doing more. So I wouldn't rush in terms of timing. I think we have weeks, perhaps a month, to think about what intervention should be. But I think preventing prices from rising, and according to one estimate, the energy price cap could go up by £500, which gets you back to where they were in 2023. So we really should prevent that from happening, and that would be the July price cap.
Carsten, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Carsten Young there. Let's continue the discussion on the war now with our defence and security analyst, Michael Clark, who's with us in studio. Michael, first question I wanted to pick up on, actually, off the back of that, is oil prices. because we saw President Trump try to announce something quite interesting yesterday that temporarily at least meant oil prices, which had risen sharply, came back a little bit, relatively speaking. And it all comes down to whether or not the Straits of Hormuz are open or closed. Just let us know what he did and why it matters, because we discussed this a bit yesterday. It's not a canal that you open or close. A lot comes back to ships being able to be insured or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you make the Strait of Hormuz dangerous, then effectively you close it, which is what has happened. The ships are not going through. President Trump said yesterday, well, maybe we could use the Navy to convoy ships through. That's been done before in the tanker war in the 1980s. It doesn't actually help against small craft attacking ships or shore-based anti-ship missiles. It's very difficult to convoy something through if we, a warship at either end and 6 ships in the middle. It still leaves them fairly vulnerable. The other thing that they could do is act as sentry. They could put a lot of their own destroyers into the Gulf, and they would act as a sort of gun line to take down any drones or attack ships. More likely, what they're going to do, and Dan Kane kind of indicated this yesterday, he said, we're deploying more tactical air power. I think they're going to start attacking anything that moves on the Iranian side. In other words, actually just take out all the ability the Iranians may have to launch anything against ships. That's what I think they'll do. They'll go on the offensive. That hasn't been done before.
Could that work? I mean, clearly this...
We don't know. I mean, it would work if they could convince the companies that it was safe to go. I mean, if the companies don't believe it, they're not going to put a tanker in the way. I mean, yesterday, the price of tankers went from $200,000 a day to $400,000 a day. So having a tanker tied up the other side of the Gulf for $400,000 a day is not any great economic prospect. But owners are not going to put tankers through there unless they believe that the United States, can keep the thing open in reality. So I think a lot more military hardware will be applied to this, either through convoys, more likely, I think, through a more aggressive forward attack strategy. But ultimately, remember, I mean, of all the stuff that comes out of the Gulf, I mean, all the tankers turn left, they don't turn right anymore. So the Gulf provides 90% of what comes out of the Gulf goes to Asia, goes to India, China and Asia. Only 10% goes to the rest of the world, Africa, Europe, the United States. So that's why the Asian markets are much more worried about this than the other markets.
That's interesting. I didn't actually realise that before, but yeah, it makes complete sense. I just wondered if we could zoom out for a bit, because it feels like, this started off as what felt like quite a kind of targeted operation, right? Kind of getting rid of the Ayatollah. Since then, things are happening all over the place, right? You've got UK bases in Cyprus being targeted, you've got Hezbollah, you've got... It feels like it's a kind of a multi-region wider conflict. I mean, how alarmed should we be by this?
We should be worried about it. I mean, this is the issue. You can control a military operation, and if you're the American military, you can control it digitally down to the last element. But once you start a war, you can't control a war. I mean, a war is a different sort of thing. And the Iranians have got a strategy. I mean, it may or may not work, but they've thought about this. And what they're doing, they've gone up the escalation ladder immediately. They haven't gone to it after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. On day one, they attacked the whole region. So what the Iranians are saying, in the sense of the world, is if the Americans attack us, then we'll make everybody suffer until you all lean on the Americans to stop. That's their strategy. May or may not work. But that has brought in, the Mediterranean, Cyprus, right down to the Gulf. Duqm, they've even attacked Oman, which is their friend, attacking the port of Duqm. And they said that was a mistake. They didn't mean to do that. That's because they've decentralised their command structure, and that was their tactic kind of on autopilot. But look, I mean, the other side of Iran, look at the geography of it. Pakistan and Afghanistan. This extends into Asia. And Pakistan and Afghanistan are already at war. They started a war last week, according to the Pakistan Defence Minister. So you've got a war in South Asia, relatively minor war at the moment, and then this major regional war, which has been sparked by one attack, or one set of attacks, on Iran. So, yeah, this is the most serious regional war because the Iranians have regionalised it as part of their strategy of response, to hurt everybody, to make everybody lean on America.
That makes a lot of sense.
To keep the Strait of Hormuz shut, or to keep things ticking along or escalated as they are, what does it take from the Iranian side? Because, I mean, we've talked about ultimate military power. US, Israel can crush Iran. But to just keep being this hindrance, which is an understatement, but the hindrance that they are, does it take have they got enough supplies to prolong it?
Well, we think they've got about, according to Israeli intelligence, they've got about 2,500 missiles, so 2,500 missiles, and they haven't used anything like that yet, and then tens of thousands of drones, and they've been producing them. So they could keep this up for a while yet, and the level will rise and fall. The level was very high on Saturday and Sunday, then it fell a bit yesterday, Monday and Tuesday, what are we on now? Wednesday, that's right, day 5. And it may rise again, day 5, 6, I'm guessing, we don't know. But so that the rate of attack may sort of come and go, but they can keep this up for some weeks. And their proxies around the region have only just started to get into gear, in their view. So Hezbollah have already provoked Israel, and now there's a Lebanon war going on below this war, as it was part of this war. One campaign is Israel's attack into Lebanon. They're trying to deal with Hezbollah once and for all. That's what the Israelis want. But I think the other Iranian proxies might well start to operate, the Houthis and some of their militias in Iraq and Syria. And then there's the issue of terrorism in the Western world. There's plenty of Iranian sleepers around the Western world, and we might see an uptick in terrorist attacks. Certainly our security services are very aware of that possibility.
I think we've got pictures of 2 ships that you were going to refer to. One is a British ship and one is a Greek ship. These are both heading to help protect RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus.
Yes. Yes, I mean, Akrotiri was targeted and successfully. The first 2 drones didn't make it, fell into the sea short, and the third one did. And Akrotiri, British base, really important British base, is wide open. And the point is, you know, I mean, this crisis has been coming for some time. I mean, we've certainly had at least a couple of weeks' notice, and there was no British ship at all in the Mediterranean. And what the government has now said is that HMS Dragon, which was on sea trials, it's had its engine reconditioned, and it's been on sea trials. So they're sending HMS Dragon. But interestingly, the Greeks are sending their own ship, the Kimmon, which is a similar frigate. And the Kimmon has the same missile system, air defence systems. The Kimmon will be there a lot sooner than the Dragon. So the Dragon's got to go through the Straits of Gibraltar. It's at least 3 days then to Cyprus. It won't be there for several days. And the French carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, which was with the Dauntless. The Dauntless was with the Charles de Gaulle on Atlantic exercises. I don't know why the Dauntless isn't going as well, but it isn't. And the Charles de Gaulle is now going to go to help. So we've got our British base in Cyprus, no British ship available. The British ship that will get there with air defence will be some days. In the meantime, the Greeks will help defend it, and the French will help defend it. That's not a great look for the Admiralty. We've got one other ship in the region, HMS Middleton, which is a mine hunter, and it's due to be withdrawn.
Wow. Michael, as always, a pleasure. So much information packed in from Michael. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be back with all the day's top stories.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Good morning, it is 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilfred, very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
More strikes in Beirut this morning after Israel issued evacuation orders for 16 towns and villages. The Israel Defense Force says it's targeting Hezbollah.
The war in Iran enters its fifth day, with the Israeli military saying it launched a broad wave of strikes on Iran overnight.
The strained relationship. President Trump lashes out at Keir Starmer for his reluctance to help initially in the war.
So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
After striking Oman, Britain charters a commercial flight to get stranded citizens out later today, prioritising the most vulnerable. A very good morning to you. President Trump didn't hold back last night when he attacked Sir Keir Starmer for his reluctance to help America in its war with Iran, saying the Prime Minister's no Churchill and that he wasn't happy with the UK for not allowing the US to use its military bases from the beginning.
Now, Keir Starmer isn't the only one that Donald Trump is not happy with. He's even more cross with Spain, but it has got people questioning the strength of the so-called special relationship between Britain and the US. We'll discuss that more in a moment. And also, we should say this morning, we've got our trio of correspondents across the region, our international correspondent John Sparks in Beirut, Sally Lockwood in Dubai, and Diana Magnay, of course, as well in Jerusalem. But let's just run you through, shall we, what happened overnight.
Well, there have been explosions in Beirut, Lebanon's capital city, this morning. That's after Israel's military issued evacuation orders for 16 villages.
And there have also been explosions in Tehran as well overnight. Now, Israel says it began a broad wave of strikes in Iran, and they say that they were targeting launch sites and aerial defence systems.
Israel's military also struck a building linked to Iran's assembly of experts, reducing it to rubble. Clerics have been expected to gather to choose a new supreme leader.
And it's not just in Iran, of course, because the US State Department is urging all US citizens to evacuate both Saudi Arabia and Oman because of safety risks. And of course, yesterday, there were drone attacks in Oman's commercial port and also the US Embassy in Riyadh too.
Meanwhile, surging oil prices have sparked a sell-off once again in markets, in particular in Asian markets overnight. South Korea's Kospi, the eye of the storm, down double-digit percentages this morning.
Now, the UK government has deployed HMS Dragon to Cyprus. Now, that is after an RAF base on the island was hit by a drone over the weekend. British warplanes have also been involved in the Middle East. They've shot down multiple drones in the sky over Jordan as well. So an awful lot of action, a lot of explosions going on in the last 24 hours.
Let's have a quick reminder of what President Trump, though, said relating to Prime Minister Starmer overnight.
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
I want to let you can see the frustration there. Donald Trump not a happy man at all with Keir Starmer. We did ask the government minister about this on the programme this morning as well. This is what James Murray had to say in response.
I think people know that words will be said, phrases will be used, but what's important is the relationship between the US and the UK. And if you think about it right now, the US and the UK will be working together on these defensive actions in the Middle East. We will be sharing intelligence as we do 365 days a year. That relationship between the US and the UK is strong, is historic, is long-lasting, and the basis of our security.
And I think it's interesting that the UK is standing firm on this. You know, that they are not in any way saying that we were wrong or trying to placate Donald Trump. They're saying, yeah, we were kind of right, we agree with the decision, this was the legal advice at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it was very interesting what Lord Rickett said as well, which is, let's see where we are in weeks and months, that obviously President Trump has form in saying things and then not necessarily following them through. But I think actually more pertinent is just to point to what President Trump said about Spain, which was much more pronounced. He said, as it related to Spain, that he'd instructed the Treasury Secretary to cut off all dealings with Spain. We're going to cut all trade with Spain. Clearly a much more pronounced anti-Spanish reaction than an anti-British one. And look, I do think, therefore, you can look at the Starmer-Trump whispering of the last year or two and look at it as having some benefit over the last few days, as opposed to, I think, the immediate reaction yesterday being people saying, well, what was the point in all of Starmer's attempts to woo Trump if you get this reaction? The reaction is just a quick jibe so far, which is fairly common from President Trump. So I think the question really is, where does it go from here? Is there anything that's more pronounced to come?
Yeah, look what he does, not what he says, almost. Let's bring in John, Sally and Diana with us today. To Diana, first, look, an awful lot of movements overnight. Diana, what can you bring us up to speed with?
Right, well, as you say, a broad range of strikes on Iran from Israel and the United States also. The IDF saying that they had targeted especially Basij, the Revolutionary Guards volunteer force sites in Tehran, and also other security command centres. We know they've also hit a nuclear site and that they continue to try and take out Iran's missile launcher capabilities wherever they find them. The commander of Central Command, the US Central Command, gave an interesting update, operational update, late last night, saying that they dropped, they'd hit 2,000 targets across Iran. And also, I thought this was an amazing fact, that in the first 24 hours, the scale of the operation was almost double that of the first 24 hours of Operation Shock and Awe back in against Iraq in 2003. I would say that over the last 2 days, really, the pace of fire coming from Iran towards Israel does seem to have lessened. The sirens just are not sounding in the way that they were. Given the fact that the Gulf countries say that 500 missiles already have gone their way, hundreds have come over here, I would imagine that the Iranians are either pacing themselves or definitely seeing that their stockpiles are being degraded and their ability to launch them degraded too, which is exactly Israel's and the United States' objective here. Interesting stuff from Donald Trump, besides what he said about our Prime Minister. He is going to try and prop up the energy markets by providing sort of insurance for any shipping around the Gulf region, he said, and also to provide a naval escort to ships trying to pass through the Straits of Hormuz after the Iranians said that they would set fire to any ships going through there. He also made comments about a potential, the leadership in Iran. You know, this idea of regime change seems to have faded away from Donald Trump's objectives, but he said that he would prefer to see someone come from within, but they have essentially knocked off most of the leaders that the United States knew anything about. There is a sense that we may be hearing soon who Iran decides to appoint. The interim council are tasked with appointing a new supreme leader and who that may be. And in lieu of that, Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, put a post out on X earlier today saying in unequivocal terms, whoever that may be, if they continue the Iranian regime's policy of death to Israel and death to America, then they will be an unequivocal target for elimination. Sophie.
Diana, I'll pick it up there. Great stuff in Jerusalem. Let's get to John in Beirut. And John, I mean, literally, moments after we spoke to you last hour, we showed a live picture of another explosion going off there in Beirut where you are. What is the latest?
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, a real intensification. There's a real escalation going on. We just heard a bang, sort of ricochet through the area behind me, just as Diana was speaking. So yeah, it's very active, it's very lively here on both sides, right? I mean, Hezbollah, they fired off a volley of rockets towards a community in North Israel. And the Israelis, they are certainly ramping things up here. We've heard their planes this morning circling over the city. There have been a series of loud bangs, one particularly loud bang about 2 hours ago, at the same time that they released an evacuation order for a community called Hadath. That's about 3 or 4 kilometers from where I am standing. They also hit a hotel in East Beirut. what's called the Comfort Hotel in a predominantly Christian area of the city. You know, they may have been after a specific individual, trying to assassinate somebody, trying to take somebody out in that case. And on the whole topic of evacuation orders, and the Israelis have released about 24 of them this morning for areas right across Lebanon. Sometimes the Israelis issue them and sometimes they don't. And the feeling in Lebanon is when they don't, they're trying to take people out. They're trying to assassinate, say, Hezbollah leadership, that sort of thing. And the problem with that policy is that the people who live nearby, who live in the vicinity, they don't get those warnings. That's the danger. And I think that's one reason, one of many, why you've got whole areas of Lebanon right now. In the south, the Bekaa Valley, the southern suburbs of Beirut that have been pounded. You've got whole areas of the country emptying out. People are looking for a new place to go. A lot of people are sleeping out in the open, and you've got Israeli troops beginning to move in the south, taking strategic positions. And you've got Hezbollah. They are moving in as well. As the people come out, you've got the two sides moving in. And the thing about Hezbollah is they didn't retreat after their opening salvo on Sunday night. They haven't disappeared in the shadows. They seem to be up for the fight. In fact, one of their political leaders yesterday said, let it be an open war. Let it be an open war. So I think, yeah, I think things are really escalating here.
John, thank you so much. John Sparks there, keeping us updated on, as he says, an escalating situation in Beirut. Well, let's talk now to Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us. Sally, what's happening where you are?
Good morning to you, Sophie. Well, after a rather calm evening, there were a few hours where there was a lull yesterday evening. Things got very busy again around midnight with emergency alerts and air raid sirens going off in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and an explosion at the American consulate here in Dubai. Videos circulating shortly after showing what looks like a drone flying in and then striking the US embassy, and a big explosion. It's in a built-up area of the old city of Dubai, not far from the UK consulate, and it has really shocked and unsettled people here this morning. The American travel advice and the British travel advice has been updated. The US is urging its citizens to leave the UAE if they can do so safely, advising them that the Omani and Saudi borders are open, although congested. And I do know people who have made their way to the Oman border and are on their way there now to try and fly out. The British Embassy has made British citizens aware that some commercial flights have started again this morning, both with Emirates and Etihad out of Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And they are urging people who don't need to be in the UAE. They're saying if your presence here isn't essential, you may wish to consider leaving if you judge you can access these options safely. But both the American advice and the British advice is if you can't leave safely, then to shelter in place. Now, the British have a first evacuation flight leaving from Muscat this evening. And of course, there are tens of thousands of British tourists wanting to get out. So it is quite an operation. And the British Embassy here is urging operators to make more commercial flights available. But of course, it's quite hard for them to predict exactly scheduling when we've got such a volatile situation with missile attacks every day at the moment.
Well, indeed, Sally, for sure, that's the case. Thank you so much for that in Dubai. Let's touch base on the potential for flights to get back here to the UK. One commercial charter flight out of Oman has been commissioned by the UK government to get British nationals back from there later today. Emma Birchley's standing by at Heathrow for us this morning. Emma, good morning to you. So some flights are emerging to get Brits back home over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, so there are no scheduled flights operating. However, for existing customers of the different airlines, there are repatriation flights. So we're expecting one to land here at Heathrow, an Emirates flight from Dubai in the next 10 minutes or so. There's another one later this morning. One has already landed in Manchester, another one in Birmingham. Otherwise, the scheduled flights are suspended until at least 8 o'clock UK time. this evening, but I wouldn't be surprised if that changes. Etihad as well, there's a flight due to come in here from Abu Dhabi later today, but again, their flights suspended, their scheduled flights until 10 tomorrow. And then you've got British Airways, who have made it clear that they will not be operating out of the United Arab Emirates at all, and what they are doing is offering a flight this evening. It'll leave at 10:30 UK time from Muscat in Oman, very much on a first-come, first-served basis and just for existing customers. And that is the message from all of these airlines, is that if you've got a space on an aircraft, you will have been told about it. And just briefly to say that there's the government chartered flight also out of Muscat that will be operating later this evening to bring people back.
Emma, fantastic. Thanks so much, Emma Birchley, there for us outside Heathrow. Well, yesterday, of course, the Chancellor delivered her spring statement, providing an update on the state of the UK economy. Of course, so much of it suddenly out of date, given the situation in the Middle East. Here to talk about all of that is Andy Haldane, of course, former chief economist at the Bank of England, but now the president of the British Chambers of Commerce. A very good morning to you, Andy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wilfred. To see you.
When you've game-played these things, particularly when you're chief economist at the Bank of England, what level of increase in energy prices is enough, and how long does it have to persist to suddenly scare you to drastically alter your forecasts for the economy?
Yeah, I think you're talking about energy price rises in the 10 to 20% range.
Which we've seen.
We're just on the cusp of that now, the lower end of that now, with more upside possible, I'd say. So this is approaching the range where you junk your forecasts and all of a sudden you're reprofiling the path of interest rates likely from here.
And how long do we have to stay in this range for that to take effect?
I think we need a month of it. You know, I think at the moment, you know, if this were to fade away over the course of the next, 5 to 10 days, return to base or something closer to base, then that wouldn't be a case for scrapping the forecasts and rewriting them. I think once it persists beyond then, it begins to be embedded at the petrol station, in business costs and ultimately in energy costs for the consumer. And that is the game changer for growth.
One thing that's adjusted already is the market expectations of whether we get a rate cut next month. I think it was about 80%, this month now, March 19th.
Yeah.
It was 80% likelihood, it's now down to 30% likelihood.
Yeah.
Would you concur with that adjustment? And again, if we don't persist for a month or two, will we just get that rate cut but at the following meeting rather than this meeting?
I think that there's a strong case at the moment, given the fog of uncertainty, for the MPC on the 19th of this month, pressing the pause button. It was nailed on Monday that they will be cutting later this month. Odds now, I say 20 or 30%. That sounds reasonable unless this thing abates really quickly, which now looks less likely given the timeline.
If we see a prolonged spike, do you think it's the right move, based on where the government's finances are, to step in and help customers like we did after the Ukrainian war? And obviously there's a lot of trade-offs there. It costs the government money, but it also hurts the economy if consumers are suddenly cash-strapped.
Yeah. Well, I think it may well come July, if this sticks around and the cap comes off and all of a sudden people are sitting on what could be a very hefty increase in their energy costs, the pressure will be on. I think the government is likely to relent in that situation. And the question becomes then, Wilf, how is that funded? I think people are taxed out. I think the gilt market is maxed out. And therefore, the government is a land of hard choices about cutting its spending plans to make good on any extra support for households through energy costs.
How do you think the market reacts to what you're sort of saying if it materialises, which is basically, and maybe it's warranted, but every time something comes up, the government sort of has to step in and either borrow more or tax more or spend less. I mean, it's not a great cycle to be in.
No, it's a cycle we've been in for the better part of 20 years now. It's the single most important reason, of course, why we've seen debt ratchet up to almost 3 figures of national income. We need to find a way of weaning ourselves off that, not least given the fragility of the public finances. But this is where politics and economics prospectively collide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for an economy that's just beginning to regain its breath, having that taken away by this energy shock at this moment is probably something that's not politically tolerable, even though it poses all sorts of guilt market dilemmas.
Let's touch on that sort of, put aside the latest development, recovering our breath. Is it a good thing that the spring statement kind of came and went yesterday without much fanfare?
Overall, yes. So, the first responsibility of a Chancellor is do no harm. And the truth is, the three fiscal events before yesterday, 2 budgets and last year's spring statement, did do some harm. It generated a degree of fear and loathing among businesses, among some households. And yes, it did not do that. It was, in that sense, a non-event, a nothing burger. That's the good news. The less good news, of course, is that given events over the weekend and subsequently, the forecasts were effectively irrelevant to the outlook, the fiscal outlook and the economic outlook. So a nothing burger with fries is what we got. And that means there's big question marks about whether more will be needed, more borrowing, more taxes, reduced spending, are still as relevant now as they were back at the end of last year.
And just weigh up, if pressures arise again, and whether it's because of the current crisis or something else, invariably pressures will rise again. How important is it, and you obviously represent British business at the BCC now, from their perspective, that next time round, it doesn't fall on them again? And with your assessment, do you fear that it might?
Well, listen, business confidence has been stuck in the mud for actually a decade, as has consumer confidence. And what the last 2 years have demonstrated, Wilf, is just how fragile that confidence is. That's why yesterday's non-event was taken as net good news, do no harm. I think given that fragility of sentiment, I would go as far as possible to avoid a shock to the system, the like of which we saw in Budget 2024 and the like of which we saw in the run-up to Budget 2025. So stability, stability, stability first and foremost, and then hopefully in the Chancellor's speech later on this month, a degree of dynamism injected through a credible growth plan is what we need.
Andy Haldane, great to see you as always. Thanks so much. The President of the British Chamber of Commerce there. We want to go straight back out to the region and bring you latest pictures from Beirut. We've been bringing you those all morning, of course. And here is some images from moments ago. Wow. Again, another explosion taking place during the course of that interview, so moments ago there in Beirut. And we'll continue to, of course, give you updates from the region. John Sparks, as you know, is there, thankfully at a, relatively safe distance, but a reminder of the extraordinary work going on in the field by our team and their peers. But that was moments ago there in Beirut.
Yeah, John Sparks talking about the escalation in the region. Another strike has happened in Beirut. Let's see what happened. I think it's pretty clear that the frequency of these strikes on Beirut has increased even in the time that we've been on air, even in the last hour and a half. You can see the smoke billowing up there in Beirut. The Israeli army really stepping up its operations in Lebanon.
Now, of course, Iran has also been launching retaliatory attacks against the US and Israeli strikes against them. And our Tom Clark has been diving in to the relative costs of this. So often relatively cheap Iranian drones are being used to attack and to repel them as taking very expensive Western-made missiles. Here's Tom Clark's explanation.
All wars are expensive, but are the costs of America's attack on Iran financially and logistically unsustainable? Take a look at this. This is Iranian state-affiliated media showcasing vast stockpiles of low-cost but highly lethal Shahed drones. In response to America and Israel's attack on Iran, the regime launched hundreds of these against its attackers and their allies. But there's a huge mathematical mismatch between the cost of Iran's weapons and those used to defend against them. Take the UAE, for example. It's had amazing success in thwarting Iranian missile and drone attacks, claiming to have downed more than 90% of those fired at it in the first 3 days of the conflict. But a Shahed drone costs between $20,000 and $50,000. The missiles used to intercept them between $500,000 and $1.5 million. One analyst estimating it could have cost the UAE up to $750 million to thwart an attack of around 500 Shahed drones. That's 20 to 30 times more than it cost Iran to launch them.
The math clearly favors Iran in this strategy of attrition because they just have, we don't know exactly how many, Shahed drones they might have in their stockpiles, but it's much larger than the combined total of the stockpiles of interceptor missiles that are available. We're now seeing sort of a race between Israel and the United States trying to locate this drone infrastructure to try to destroy it, to reduce the pressure on these interceptors versus Iran trying to keep it an active threat.
The UAE says it's got plenty of missile stockpiles to continue to defend itself, but it's been reported that America's allies in the Middle East are desperately trying to replenish their supplies of mainly US-made missile interceptors. The question is, will they be able to do that, given it looks like America may well be running out of ammo too? Take Tomahawk missiles, very effective and very expensive, being launched here from warships off Iran. It's estimated the US military's deployed up to 400 Tomahawk missiles to the Middle East. That represents 10% of the 4,000-strong US arsenal. Stockpiles of THAAD missiles are thought to be seriously depleted too. America reported launching around 150 of them in its 12-day war with Iran in June last year. That represents about a quarter of its 600-plus stockpiles of that weapon.
We are using these interceptors at a rate that's much faster than you can possibly replace them. The problem is that increases your long-term strategic risk, particularly in other theaters.
America, of course, can always withdraw from the Middle East once it's run out of weapons, but analysts warn its peer adversaries are watching. If America depletes its arsenal through campaigns like this, what power would it have to deter Russia or China if they decided to lash out too? Tom Clark, Sky News.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big question, isn't it? Particularly, of course, when you think about A, do we have the right equipment? And B, also, is it money well spent? Which is particularly, of course, pertinent given the pressure on the public finances and the demands and the cries for more spending on defence as well.
After the break, we will be discussing this and much more with the Liberal Democrats. Daisy Cooper will be with us.
the best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Well, look, politicians of all parties here in the UK are dealing with the fallout of the war in Iran, how we should be responding to Donald Trump in America, what's it going to mean for the cost of living, all questions to put to our next guest, the Deputy Leader of the Lib Dems and Treasury spokesperson, Daisy Cooper. Good to have you with us. So Donald Trump has really come out, hasn't he, against Keir Starmer, saying he's no Winston Churchill. What do you make of it?
Well, he's no Franklin Roosevelt, is he? Let's be honest. Look, we Liberal Democrats have had our criticisms of Keir Starmer. We've said from the get-go that we think he should have been standing up to Donald Trump. But I think that Donald Trump's comments are outrageous. You know, it is because of his tariff war that we're seeing the cost of living made worse here in the UK. It's because of his illegal actions in Iran that British service personnel and British citizens are now incredibly scared and worried for their lives out in the Middle East. I think Donald Trump needs to rein it in a little bit and be reminded who his allies are in this very fragile world.
You talked there about the illegal intervention as you see it. And look, there's lots of concerns about where this war is going to go, not least the end point and who takes over. But there'll be some who think that actually Donald Trump's done the right thing here, that people were taking to the streets in Iran, they were being gunned down, they were losing their lives, they were asking for help, and Donald Trump promised them that that help was going to come.
Look, the Iranian regime is appalling. Like, we all know that. There's no one's quibbling about that. And obviously we want to support the Iranian people so that they can take control of their own country, so that they can decide their own destiny, so that they can become democratic once again and decide for themselves how to run their country. But it's not remotely clear what the end game is for America. Sometimes they're saying it's regime change, sometimes they're saying it's about nuclear weapons. It's not remotely clear if there's a plan. And history tells us very firmly, when you look at lots of examples, including in Iraq, if you start bombing a country and taking out leaders without a plan to build up institutions, build up civil society, it ends up in a real mess. So I think that we Liberal Democrats are right to be urging caution. We have said that we will support the government in terms of its defensive actions, but we are worried that there could be a slippery slope, and we are pressing the government to be really clear about what counts as defensive action and what counts as offensive action, and that Parliament has a vote on that when it comes.
Can I ask how worried you are about the impact on the cost of living? Do you think it is going to feed through in petrol prices, energy bills, how much you pay in the supermarket, all that kind of thing, or is that actually too early to say?
I think it's very likely that it will. Most people are warning that it will. Yesterday I said to the Chancellor during the spring statement that I was worried that fuel and food prices were going to go up. We've seen warnings from independent organisations, including from the RAC as well. And that's why we said ahead of the spring statement that we wanted the Chancellor to cancel the 1p increase in fuel duty that's supposed to come in September, because during a cost of living crisis, there are many people who have to drive to get to work or for caring responsibilities, and people will be very worried about the cost of petrol going up.
Can I just ask you a little bit of a different question about politics, right? Because we've seen an extraordinary splintering in British politics, right? We saw that at the Gorton and Denton by-election. We've seen that in recent polls. But it feels a little bit like the conversation is being dominated by Reform, I guess you could say the populists on the right, and the Green Party, the populists on the left. I mean, where are the Lib Dems? Are you kind of missing a bit of a trick here?
No, look, populist parties are very noisy, for sure, but we are determined to prepare ourselves to potentially be a party of power, and we're doing the serious thinking behind the scenes to make sure that we are a serious party capable of turning this country around. For too long, people have been fed up with the Conservatives and the Labour Party, two failed old parties that have failed to get Britain growing again. And when you look at real elections, last year we won more by-elections than any other political party.
Didn't do very well in Gorton, did you? I mean, this is the point, right?
Yeah, but look, by-elections are a different beast, aren't they? They always are. And that was a three.
By-elections.
Well, no, in council by-elections last year, we won more council by-elections right across the country than any other political party, including Reform, Greens or anybody else. Denton and Gorton was a three-horse race. And you will know from the last Parliament, there were particular by-elections where we, Liberal Democrats, won those by-elections, in many cases breaking British political history in terms of the size of that result. By-elections are really quite different. We didn't have a dog in the fight in Gorton and Denton. So that's a kind of, that's not one to test us. But if you look at the elections coming up, we're pretty confident we're going to do well.
Because you say there that you're doing the kind of serious thinking and all that kind of thing. Do you need to do a better job of telling us about what that serious thinking is and really punching through? Because it does feel that, you know, if you look at the polling, for example, you're at risk of slipping out of the national conversation.
Look, I think we've been pretty punchy. We were the first party to come out and say that the Prime Minister should stand up to Donald Trump. We have condemned Trump's tariff wars and been pretty spiky on that issue. We're the only party calling for much stronger relationships with the EU and demanding the government gets a customs union and makes it a priority. We've been talking relentlessly about getting growth. We've come out with plans to tackle the issue about the graduate rip-off, which have been welcomed by the IFS and other organisations. We've been making change in Parliament, changing legislation, getting concessions out of the government. So, you know, the stories are out there, the content is out there. It'd be nice if you came on with your show, if you could invite us onto your show more often.
We have you on a lot, as you can see. So no questions about Davy's leadership then, no?
No.
OK, great to have you on, as always, Daisy Cooper. And don't worry, the seat is here for you whenever you want to come on. Daisy Cooper there for the Liberal Democrats. Let's have a look now, shall we, at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather. Well, the south and the east look pretty fine into next week. Northern and western parts will see a bit of rain at times, though. And there's already some rain for parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland and Scotland. Most other places, though, look dry. England and Wales will see some early low cloud and fog slowly lifting this morning to leave lots of sunshine by lunchtime. The East Midlands, the Welsh Marshes and southwest England will remain grey the longest. Elsewhere, though, it will stay pretty cloudy, a bit of patchy rain becoming confined to Northern Ireland and western Scotland. All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
After this short break, we'll be discussing the very latest of the impact on the markets and oil prices, in particular gas prices, with Simon French. We'll be right back.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Okay, but
listen,
I told you 3 times.
They saw two guys, two bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Welcome back. Well, South Korea's Kospi, the stock index in South Korea, has just put in its biggest daily loss ever. It fell 12% today as the war in Iran sparks sharp rises in oil prices and creates volatility and uncertainty in stock markets. We're joined by Simon French, Chief Economist at Panmure Liberum, the UK's largest independent investment bank. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us, Simon. So something like that is very significantly headline-grabbing.
Yes.
And it fell sharply the day before. Why is Asia a bit more affected than the stock markets here?
Disruption to global trade. So while we focused a lot, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about the impact of oil through the Middle East, the Straits of Hormuz, there's a broader worry for Asian economies, very reliant in terms of their growth on exports, that this, if you like, puts more friction in the sort of gears of global trade, and those Asian economies that are heavily geared to that will be most adversely impacted.
There's also a point that some of these markets, South Korea in particular, had risen extraordinarily quickly in the days and weeks leading up. So when you have a change in risk sentiment,
yes,
it affects the ones that have risen the fastest most of all.
That's right. You know, what market participants would call, you know, sort of some element of covering your position. If you've made a lot of gains, and in the case of South Korean indexes, and indeed actually the UK FTSE, although it's fallen quite aggressively in the last few days, still up 5% this year. South Korean index much, much more than that. That has been the place to be. Actually, non-US equities has been the place to be. So if you start to challenge those consensus trades, and the consensus trade has been short the dollar, and short the US market, and suddenly that's your classic safe haven, then you get some quite big whipsaw moves.
Let's talk about the move in oil prices that we've seen so far. When you sort of assess the UK finances, the outlook here, what's the price level that you kind of have in mind that starts to really take effect to domestic forecasts for inflation and for growth?
So there's the oil story and there's the gas story, and the transmission mechanism is somewhat different between the two. In oil, in terms of internal combustion engine, the forecourt price of petrol, actually the transmission is 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll start to see the squeeze on disposable income if these levels persist for, you know, by Easter, basically. The picture for gas, though, is slightly different. That is making the marginal price for electricity generation in the UK and feeds into the energy price cap. Now, the next move in the energy price cap for households is actually down. It's down about £115 on the 1st of April. But it's the 1st of July, where if we're looking at an impulse on consumer spending, on growth, and therefore perhaps calls for the government to intervene, it'll be July and into the second half of the year before we see that hitting households. So the government has time to think about this in terms of the transmission on energy costs for households. It probably has less time for forecourt prices that might impact the growth outlook for the UK.
And what about interest rates? I mean, we were talking earlier about this, but it doesn't look like we get a rate cut now on the 19th of March.
That's right.
What about after that?
Well, to some extent, if you can tell me where the oil price lands and the gas price lands, then I'll tell you what happens to rates. But look, being flippancy aside, I think the idea the market had that there was going to be a rate cut in March hinged on one vote, and that was the Governor, Andrew Bailey, flipping his vote from hold to cut. He's going to play for time. That's the market perception. But he's got another meeting at the back end of April, 30th of April, where perhaps that will be the point if energy prices return. But I think the issue is that almost whatever happens now, we're likely to see sort of upside risk to inflation. It's a reason for the Monetary Policy Committee to sit on their hands, and possibly the 2 to 3 cuts the market was pricing looks more like sort of 1 for the year as we stand here now.
And step back from it all, the extent to which the government has flexibility, if needs be, to step in and help people with their energy bills. Following yesterday's spring statement, a lot of the coverage, showing that there's been an improvement. Has it been a drastic improvement in the headroom? And how would the markets react if the government had to step in again for a sort of wild card, exogenous shock to find more money?
Well, 2 parts to the question. First of all, how much of that headroom improvement yesterday was the result of lower gilt yields, the cost of government borrowing, at the time that the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, put together the forecast? More than half, actually, of that improved headroom as a result of lower gilt yields. Now, that's all evaporated. Those yields have moved. So if you did a mark-to-market assessment right now, you would see that headroom eliminated. Your second point in terms of how gilts would respond, I mean, to some extent, we would be going back in perhaps sort of slightly less extreme forms to the mini-budget in September 2022, when the UK government unveiled a very big bailout. Something on that scale, gilt markets would really reprice down, yields up. I don't think anybody's talking about that at this juncture, but I think what we're talking about is fatigue with endless bailouts, adding to total debt, adding to the amount of public spending that has to be devoted to debt servicing. That's the problem the gilt markets have to absorb.
And step back rating out of 10 for where we are with the spring statement yesterday and with Rachel Reeves doing it, is it much improved compared to the reaction after the past statements?
Look, I'd say 8 out of 10 on the basis that if the job there was to not mess things up, not add to the uncertainty in what is a very uncertain world, job done. Why isn't it 9 or 10? Well, those growth forecasts, 1.5% average for the rest of the decade, that's pretty subdued, isn't it? It tells you that the sort of primary mission of the government in terms of promoting fast levels of growth is just not working.
Simon, great to see you as always. Thanks so much. Simon French from Panmure Liberum.
Well, we're talking next about, of course, the ongoing international situation. An awful lot of people, an awful lot of Brits worried about getting home from the Middle East. And we can tell you the government's going to charter a commercial flight out of Oman this evening to try and get some of them home. 300,000 Brits in total stranded in the Gulf. And we're joined now by Alfie Hughes and Callum Brodie, who were only supposed to have a 3-hour layover in Dubai, but have been stranded there since. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. That's such a nightmare situation for you. Just, Alfie, give us that snapshot that you were meant to be there for 3 hours. On which day?
It was on Saturday, the 28th. We were flying home from Manila, and we had there were news channels on the flights, so we knew what was going on probably about 4 hours out from. About 4 hours out from Dubai. We knew what was going on, so we had an idea that we probably weren't going to be getting out of there. But yeah, it's been a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, that is an absolute understatement, I have to say. So while you were on the plane coming into Dubai, you realised there was a problem. And then what happened? You landed at the airport. What happened next?
Yeah, we landed at the airport, and all of the flights to London that were due to leave a couple hours before ours were already delayed by a couple hours. So we knew that, we knew it was fairly unlikely we were going to get out of there, and that we were going to be stuck for a few days. And then I'd say it was probably, I don't know, what time do you reckon it was, 5 o'clock? The 5 o'clock local time that they finally cancelled all the flights. So then it was pandemonium, everybody trying to find their bags, get airport vouchers, and yeah.
And Callum, what have you done in the days past? And, has it all come at an expense out of your own pockets? And do you have any guidance of when you might be able to get on a flight out of there?
As Alfie said, on the first night in the airport, it was chaos. So we paid for a hotel out of pocket. Fortunately, since Emirates have covered the hotel and food costs that we've incurred. Dubai itself, we've never been before, but it definitely seems quieter than it otherwise would be. Any sort of other day-to-day expenses we've been covering outside of the meals. And fortunately, my work have been really understanding. Was meant to return to work on Monday. But obviously haven't been able to do sort of my day-to-day job as I'd otherwise planned.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I guess you could say, I'm really sorry, but I'm stuck in Dubai. There's absolutely no way of coming in at 9 a.m. the next morning or whatever it is. We've talked to a few people out in Dubai, and it feels like people have been quite split. Some people very, very anxious, worried about the strikes that they've heard, sheltering. Other people much more kind of relaxed, I guess, still sunbathing. What kind of camp are you guys in?
I think we're definitely on edge. I think we're probably a bit more relaxed about it than some people. I think we're more frustrated that it's taking so long for us to kind of get home. I think we're aware as well that that we're in quite a privileged position, that we've been put up in a hotel and we've got food provided for us, whereas, other kind of civilians in the region don't have access to that. So it's like a lot tougher on them, I think, than it is on us. But I think frustration is probably the biggest feeling that we have at the moment.
Callum, have you had guidance from the government, from the Foreign Office, and help from them? There's been a little bit of a debate here about whether, expats, which you guys obviously aren't, are worthy of help in this regard if they've chosen to move to Dubai to pay tax, which I don't know if you've seen the coverage of. But have you been getting help and guidance from the UK government or not?
No, I think it's the lack of communication across the board which is most frustrating. We've had a couple of emails from the government, which has basically just said to stay put. I've sort of seen the debate about expats in Dubai and tourists who've sort of willingly come here. I think for us it's most frustrating because we obviously had booked a layover in Dubai, but neither of us have ever wanted to end up here. So we're grateful for the accommodation and the hospitality that we've received, but yeah, just want to get home now.
Oh, crossing our fingers for you. As you say, it's just beggars belief, really, that you've just expecting a stopover in Dubai and now you've been there for days in the middle of a war with Iran. Good to have you on the programme. Thank you so much. And we're crossing our fingers that you get home soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Thanks.
Yeah. Not that it's, of course, a crime if you'd aimed to stay in Dubai for either a short or long period of time either. Now, we've been saying a lot about the impact the war is having on the region. Let's take you inside Iran now. Funerals have been held for 180 schoolgirls killed on the first day of the war when the US-Israeli strikes began.
And as you can imagine, there's anger on the streets. Officials remain pretty defiant in the face of continuing attacks. Here's Lisa Holland.
Their tiny coffins were piled one on top of another and driven through the centre of the southern Iranian city of Minab in a mass funeral. Iran says mostly little girls of primary school age died with their teachers as they studied. They gathered as far as the eye could see, angry and distraught at such a devastating loss of life in what is the deadliest single incident since hostilities began last Saturday. This was the aftermath of the school attack. Israel says it's not aware of any Israeli or American strikes in the area at the time, but there's been an international outcry that a place of learning has been bombed without accountability. But these are attacks Israel has claimed responsibility for. The fighters are in the sky. They're hitting hard, says an Iranian who filmed the bombardment. Israel says it destroyed the command centre for Iran's entire armed forces as it hit the capital in wave after wave of strikes. Barakella, meaning bravo or well done, he says. Israel's Air Force has also been in action, picking off missile launchers and defence systems from the air. There's already widespread damage, but as Israel and America warned more than 1 million people to leave their homes as it tries to dismantle the regime's infrastructure, there was defiance on the streets.
Curse be upon your ancestors, Trump. The Americans think they can force us to surrender with missiles, but they can't do this kind of things. We will definitely defeat them. We're not afraid of being killed.
Iran isn't done yet. The Fars news agency, which is close to the IRGC, the military defenders of the regime, released this footage, which it says shows huge underground stockpiles of drones and missiles ready to be deployed. We can't independently verify the pictures. We don't know when it was filmed or even if the images are real. What we can say is Iran's propaganda war rages on as Donald Trump doubles down on his campaign from the air. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Awful, of course, being reminded there of the damage on both sides of this conflict thus far. And the damage is ongoing. And when we come back, we will have the very latest from Beirut, which is seemingly the eye of the storm this morning. We've got live pictures for you there. And multiple explosions have unfolded through the course of the morning as Israel has upped its attacks on Beirut, targeting Hezbollah there. And we'll have more from the region when we do come back.
Yeah, John Sparks will be in Beirut for us. And that sound has been ringing out throughout Beirut this morning.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophy and Wilf, good morning from me as well. There's been more explosions this morning. We're going to bring you the very latest.
Ongoing strikes this morning on Beirut after Israel issued evacuation orders for 16 towns and villages. The IDF says it's targeting Hezbollah.
The war in Iran enters its fifth day. The Israeli military saying it launched a broad wave of strikes also in Iran overnight.
The strained relationship. President Trump lashes out at Sir Keir Starmer for his reluctance to help in the war.
So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
After a strike in Oman, Britain charters a commercial flight to get stranded citizens out later today, prioritising the most vulnerable. Good morning. Well, we begin now in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, where we've seen an increasing number of explosions happening just this morning.
Those pictures have been coming into us over the course of just the last couple of hours, and it comes after Israel's military issued an evacuation order for 16 towns and villages yesterday. And we also heard explosions in Tehran overnight, where Israel says a broad wave of strikes has begun. Let's get the latest from on the ground. Cordy Lynch is in Tel Aviv for us, but first to John Sparks, who's in Beirut. And John, as the time has passed during the course of this show, there have been more and more explosions there. What is the very latest?
Well, Wilf, you know, they're filming those images from a hilltop that overlooks the southern suburbs of Beirut because nobody can go in there. It's just too dangerous. And I can tell you that that section of the city, and you can also see it behind over my shoulders, that part of the city is getting a real pounding. We are seeing an escalation, a real intensification of this conflict. And there's no front line. There is no front line in Lebanon. Our team have counted about 7 strikes since 3 a.m. The Israelis have issued some evacuation orders. We've seen streams of smoke going up and this loud roar echoing through the buildings behind me as well. I can also tell you that the Israelis have hit a hotel in East Beirut as well, the Comfort Hotel. It's a Christian area. This is not an area that they would normally target, and I think that tells us that this conflict is moving to new areas as well. I think in that case, they may have been trying to target a member of Hezbollah or a related group in an assassination strike. And the whole thing with evacuation orders, and I should tell you that the Israelis have issued about 24 evacuation orders covering areas right across Lebanon this morning. They don't always do it before strikes. Particularly the feeling in Lebanon is when they're trying to take people out, when they're aiming to take out the Hezbollah leadership or related groups, they don't give those warnings. And the problem is the people who live nearby, they don't get those warnings either. And I think that's why one reason why we are seeing the southern suburbs behind me, huge swathes of southern Lebanon, they are emptying out right now. People are getting out of towns and villages, and they are looking for a safe place to be.
John, thank you so much. John Sparks reporting there for us from Beirut, where, as John was saying, it's been an escalating situation, an awful lot of strikes that we've seen this morning alone. Let's bring in Cordelia Lynch, who's in Tel Aviv for us. Cordelia, we've seen Israeli strikes in Beirut. We've also seen Israeli strikes in Iran. What is the latest?
That's right, Sophie. Overnight, there's been a broad wave of attacks by Israel on Iran, targeting its military and its intelligence infrastructure, and that part of a broader pattern of escalation by Israel. We have also seen significant movement too within the Strait of Hormuz. There's been a very significant impact on the oil markets. There is instability, there's concern, and there is no timetable at the moment. And I think everyone is trying to assess the next steps from here. So I think this is a kind of a pattern of anxiety setting in here, people trying to second guess what Israel and America's next maneuver might be. Now today, the funeral of Khamenei will take place. Israel has already vowed to kill his successor. At the moment, the front runner to take over from him will be his son. Meanwhile, we see a mounting death toll. One human rights agency putting it at over 1,000. The vast majority of people killed so far have been in Iran, over 550 so far. And one really important point and thing to consider and look at now, a developing situation, is speculation about possible movement of Iraqi Kurds into Iran. Now, US officials have discussed this as a possibility. They are having discussions with Kurdish forces there, in a way trying to support some kind of active rebellion, possibly in the next few days. Now, that would be laden with complications, complexities and challenges, sparking perhaps a prolonged war and a civil war that would take place inside Iran. And I think it just gives you a sense, really, that this isn't a conflict that is going to be resolved quickly.
Certainly doesn't seem that way, does it, at the moment? Back to John. John, I'm interested for your take, if you can pick up on what Cordy alluded to there, but is the latest reporting about what's going on inside Iran's leadership, and almost ironic, isn't it, if the Ayatollah successor is in fact based on a bloodline and it is in fact his son, or do we just not know yet? And I guess the broader point is, who's driving things in the meantime? Is it still the hardliners?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think we can fully expect the regime, the system in Iran, to pick one of its own. I think that is an entirely safe assumption on our part to make. They're not going to will themselves out of existence, whatever Trump or Hegseth say, whatever American and Israeli officials say about the matter. They're going to stay put, and that ultimately demonstrates the limitations of what the Americans and the Israelis are trying to do. They cannot remove the regime, its system, the Revolutionary Guard, the army, the besieged militia. They can't remove them from the air. And it reminds me of a conversation I had a couple of days ago with a woman who, we did a story about her nephew in Iran who had been killed during the protests, and she messaged me to say that she had been in touch with her family members in Iran, and they said they were delighted that Khamenei had been killed. But the fact was, the Revolutionary Guards, they were out on the streets with their guns, they were stopping people, they were checking their IDs, they were asking you to go through people's phones to see what people had been filming. The regime, and I think it's really important that we remember this, the regime is in total control of the streets in Iran, in Tehran, the capital, and surrounding cities. And what Trump has done, what Netanyahu has done, what their overwhelming military and firepower has done has not changed that dynamic. And it's unlikely to change it unless they put troops on the ground. And then we see a whole different magnitude to this conflict begin. So I think that's the ultimate problem, though, for the ambitions of Trump and the rest of them in terms of regime change or regime alteration, whatever it is that they're spelling out at the moment. They're ultimately limited in what they can do in Iran.
John, it's such an important point. And also, if Donald Trump is almost calling on citizens of Iran to kind of rise up and find the leader, well, if you are in a nation that is still so controlled, it's easier said than done. Cordelia, I wanted to squeeze in one more question to you as well. It's so good to have you both here with your expertise this morning, because we've been talking about the aims here of the US and of Israel. Do you think they're entirely in lockstep with each other, or do you get a sense that actually they both want something slightly different from the conflict?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question to ask, and there could well be clear water between the two. We've seen them, haven't we, initially? Certainly in the optics, the messaging, they appear to be in lockstep. This was a joint action, the two working together to make this decisive move, seizing an opportunity. But look, Donald Trump is a president that vowed to his base from the beginning and has continued to promise he will not be involved in these messy foreign wars, in regime change, in protracted conflicts. He is a man that likes surgical strikes, that is able to move in quickly, but then to remove America from those conflict zones. But here, he risks a far more stretched out conflict. And I think that is something that Israel, that Benjamin Netanyahu has much more of an appetite for. And that's where we might start to see some kind of political frisson emerge, because Benjamin Netanyahu now sees an opportunity to reshape the whole of the region. I was speaking to one former intelligence operator here who was saying, look, for months they've been talking about making this move into Lebanon. They now feel like they have moral top cover, that they are able to use it as a pretext to move into vast swathes of southern Lebanon and to ultimately completely crush Hezbollah in the way that they weren't able to in that 12-day conflict back in June. So they really, I think, are eyeing up something potentially over weeks and months, an extended war, whereas I think we will see in America a lot more pressure coming from Donald Trump to try and wrap these things up, and pressure too from his base, because there is fallout, there is concern that this isn't a war that his supporters want to see America wage.
John, Cordy, thanks both so much. Stay safe, and no doubt we'll be back talking to you throughout the course of the day here on Sky News. Of course, the question for many British citizens in the region is when can they get home if they want to? And the government is chartering a commercial flight out of Oman this evening to get British nationals home. Emma is at Heathrow for us this morning. And Emma, some flights have been able to leave already.
Yes, indeed, although they are not scheduled flights. These are flights that have been put on by airlines for existing customers, so repatriation flights. And actually, there have been flights arriving here at Heathrow already, also in Manchester. There's another due to land here in Heathrow and one in Birmingham later today. Also, and they're Emirates flights. Also, Etihad are operating a repatriation flight from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Those first ones I was saying about coming in from Dubai. And we know that British Airways, although not operating from the UAE, are going to be bringing a flight back from Muscat in Oman this evening for existing customers on a first-come, first-served basis. And it is from Muscat that the British government are bringing people back on the first of these chartered flights. It's going to leave at around 7 o'clock tonight. The vulnerable will be prioritised when it comes to that first flight. But we know that the UK government are in discussions with other airlines about putting on more of these flights to get people back. We know 130,000 people living in the area, in the region, or on holiday there, have registered with the UK government, and there are many thousands stranded there who were on holiday, maybe in transit from a stopover, maybe have been on holiday elsewhere, for example, Thailand, and they've been stranded without their bags. So there is desperation. And also, it's been obviously a terrifying time. You know, people holed up in their hotels with booms, the sound of big booms outside, jets flying past. So a very difficult time, and people having to shell out a lot of money. A 4.5-hour taxi drive people have been paying for to get them from Dubai to Muscat. But the overall message is that if you aren't booked on to a plane, if you don't have a ticket, do not turn up at the airport.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. Well, I think what this conflict has really underlined is the changing nature of warfare. It's all about aerial missiles, drones, and there are big questions being asked about how well the UK is prepared to fight this kind of war and also defend itself in this kind of war, and if it's doing so in the most economically efficient way. Tom Clark explains.
All wars are expensive, but are the costs of America's attack on Iran financially and logistically unsustainable? Take a look at this. This is Iranian state-affiliated media showcasing vast stockpiles of low-cost but highly lethal Shahed drones. In response to America and Israel's attack on Iran, the regime launched hundreds of these against its attackers and their allies. But there's a huge mathematical mismatch between the cost of Iran's weapons and those used to defend against them. Take the UAE, for example. It's had amazing success in thwarting Iranian missile and drone attacks, claiming to have downed more than 90% of those fired at it in the first 3 days of the conflict. But a Shahed drone costs between $20,000 and $50,000. The missiles used to intercept them between $500,000 and $1.5 million. One analyst estimating it could have cost the UAE up to $750 million to thwart an attack of around 500 Shahed drones. That's 20 to 30 times more than it cost Iran to launch them.
The math clearly favors Iran in this strategy of attrition because they just have, we don't know exactly how many, Shahed drones they might have in their stockpiles, but it's much larger than the combined total of the stockpiles of interceptor missiles that are available. We're now seeing sort of a race between Israel and the United States trying to locate this drone infrastructure, to try to destroy it, to reduce the pressure on these interceptors, versus Iran trying to keep it an active threat.
The UAE says it's got plenty of missile stockpiles to continue to defend itself, but it's been reported that America's allies in the Middle East are desperately trying to replenish their supplies of mainly US-made missile interceptors. The question is, will they be able to do that, given it looks like America may well be running out of ammo too? Take Tomahawk missiles, very effective and very expensive, being launched here from warships off Iran. It's estimated the US military's deployed up to 400 Tomahawk missiles to the Middle East, but that represents 10% of the 4,000-strong US arsenal. Stockpiles of THAAD missiles are thought to be seriously depleted too. America reported launching around 150 of them in its 12-day war with Iran in June last year. That represents about a quarter of its 600-plus stockpiles of that weapon.
We are using these interceptors at a rate that's much faster than you can possibly replace them. The problem is that increases your long-term strategic risk, particularly in other theaters.
America, of course, can always withdraw from the Middle East once it's run out of weapons, but analysts warn its peer adversaries are watching. If America depletes its arsenal through campaigns like this, what power would it have to deter Russia or China if they decided to lash out too? Tom Clark, Sky News.
Well, these are the latest pictures, or live pictures, I should say, from Portsmouth. And what you're looking at there is HMS Dragon. That is going to be on its way shortly to Cyprus to try and protect some of the UK military bases out there. It's crewed by more than 200 people, and it's been billed as one of the most capable air defence warships in the world. It could launch 8 missiles, apparently, in under 10 seconds.
It's a Type 45 destroyer. You can see the Dragon there on the front of it. Quite rare for UK Navy ships to have that kind of design on it, HMS Dragon. I have to say, I actually thought this was already on its way. We're on Wednesday. This began Saturday. It is quite a stark snapshot of our preparedness, or lack thereof, that it takes. It's still sitting there.
Yeah.
What are they doing? Loading the bow and arrows to shoot down the missiles. I mean, it is an extraordinary reminder of the state of play. And as Michael Clark was saying already, a French vessel and a Greek vessel will reach Cyprus and RAF Akrotiri before this to help us out in protecting from potential drone or missile attacks. By the way, as we look at the brave men and women of the Navy aboard the ship, that criticism is in no way towards them. What they do is unbelievable, but a sign of the times of our scaled of preparedness that this ship is still sitting there, still hasn't departed this Wednesday, 5 or so days in.
You can see them boarding as we speak. We'll have more on this after this short break.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Hello again. We're joined now by the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Malstride, who joins us now. So much going on in Iran, of course. And I just wondered if we could start in a way that isn't party political, because I just want to get your honest view on how concerned you are that the global events we're seeing could feed through into the cost of living. Petrol prices, energy bills, supermarket stuff, all that kind of thing.
Undoubtedly, this is a huge external pressure economically that's emerging. It remains to be seen how long it persists, of course, and that's a critical question. But the basic routes by which it will affect us are firstly into higher energy costs and higher inflation, which will mean that the economy will have to have higher interest rates for longer in order to bring that inflation down, and that will have a negative income effect. People will feel it in their pockets because the Resolution Foundation has said that, for example, this level of elevated energy prices may actually mean bills going up on average by £500 come the summer. It's also affecting stock markets. And it's also will have a downward pressure on global growth, which will affect us as a very open economy. So these are difficult things. The critical thing, though, Sophie, is you can't control any of that, and the Chancellor can't control that, and that's a fair and reasonable point. But what she does have control over is how resilient our economy is in terms of facing up to those kind of challenges. And what we saw yesterday, I'm afraid, was not enough to answer that question.
OK. We'll
let's talk about it. Yeah.
On the continuing on the theme of the very, very important cost of living fears that many people will have, you obviously experienced an energy price shock with the Ukraine war, right, the previous Conservative government. What lessons did you learn from that? What genuine lessons did you learn on how best to react as a country?
OK, so it's a combination of fiscal and monetary policy. So in October 2022, inflation peaked at 11.1% as a result of the Ukraine-Russia war and the same kind of dynamics that we're discussing here. So you rely on the Bank of England to take the decisions around interest rates to bring inflation down, and you have an accommodative fiscal policy that doesn't make the problem worse by driving up inflation. Now, on the day of the general election, we had successfully, jointly with the Bank of England, got inflation down to bang on target.
It's fair to say that you've been honest about as well.
We got it down to bang on 2%, which was the target. The problem with the fiscal stance that this government has is they've loaded up taxes on businesses, some of which gets passed on by way of higher prices, and they've borrowed and spent vast amounts of money, which is inflationary. So I think that is part of the reason why we've had the highest inflation last year in the G7. The IMF has said that we'll have the highest inflation this year because of the policies of the government.
Just to come in, though, because Rachel Reeves is right when she says inflation's been coming down, it's projected to come down, interest rates have come down, and borrowing costs have come down.
But we're an outlier. So we have had the highest...
That is a fair rebuttal to make.
Of course, as inflation comes down, interest rates will come down, but they have been higher and longer and stayed higher for longer than was necessary.
Can I just make... I'm a little bit frustrated for you and Labour. Like, you know, whenever inflation comes down, it's because of the great policies you've done. Whenever it goes up, it's because the factor's completely out of your control. It just feels a little bit, you know, come on, guys.
But let's get to the way in which you framed it. OK, so back in October 2022, very high inflation. We were not an outlier compared to other countries, OK? There was an external shock and everybody's inflation went up, and we brought it down in the way that I described, to bang on target on the day of the general election. What we're looking at now with inflation is we are an outlier. We have the highest inflation in the G7, and the reason for that is the inflationary policies of this government, and the government does have control over those factors.
Right, let's move on, because I want to talk to you about Donald Trump. Donald Trump yesterday said he's going to cut off all trade with Spain because they're not letting the US use their air bases for the war in Iran. Are you comfortable with the president, like, you know, using economic sanctions against other democracies who don't agree with his military action?
Look, it's a matter for the US president to take those decisions. However, I have to say, in general terms, the use of tariffs in the way that they have been used, not least if you look at Greenland, threatening NATO partners taking over Greenland, and if they don't, then there'll be trade consequences, is, I don't think, the right way to go. I think what we should be doing is actually getting tariffs down, particularly given the pressures around the Iranian war at the moment. We should be getting those tariff walls and barriers down so that we can get trade moving, and then we all benefit from that.
Finally, I just wanted to ask about your House of Commons performance yesterday, because you're becoming quite theatrical, I think is the adjective that I'd use, in the way that you kind of respond to the dispatch box. Round and round we go, like a fiscal twister, ripping up everything in its path. Rachel Reeves is like a dodgy estate agent standing in a crumbling building. Are you like this at home?
I do like Shakespeare, actually, although we don't do much of Shakespeare at home. Look, the House of Commons is a particular bear pit, OK? And I'm facing about 350 to 400 MPs opposite me, all bellowing at me. You don't even hear it on television, actually. And part of cutting through, I think, sometimes is about using imagery and things that stick in the mind and so on. And a lot of what you've just read out there has been picked up by the press, and I think many people in this country believe summarises exactly what's going on.
How do you write the stuff? Do you have like a thesaurus next to you? You've got the complete works of Shakespeare?
No, I just sit down and I think about what is it I'm trying to communicate. And in this case, it was complacency, self-congratulation, no plan for the future, which is what we saw yesterday from the Chancellor. And how do I convert that into something that people are going to remember and indeed discuss just as we are now?
A fiscal twister. There you go. Mel's Pride, thank you very much indeed, Mel's Pride, speaking to us there. Coming up, of course, we are going to be giving you the very latest when it comes to the war in Iran. We'll be talking to Yada Hakim in Jerusalem as Israel launches a broad wave of strikes in Tehran and Lebanon.
Welcome back. Well, we're hearing that a Greek fighter jet has intercepted 2 suspect objects that were close to Cyprus airspace. Let's bring in Ali Bunkel, who's there in Cyprus near RAF Akrotiri for us. Ali, what can you tell us?
Yeah, 9:30 this morning, the alert was triggered. 2 Greek F-16 fighter jets took off from an airbase near Paphos in the west of the island to intercept at least one, but there's reports of 2 suspicious objects flying towards Cypriot airspace, which they managed to intercept successfully. At the same time, staff at the US Embassy in Nicosia were taken down to the basement, but the all clear has been given now. We understand that the airspace wasn't closed at any point, although at least one flight bound for Cyprus turned round and landed back in Athens. But the Cypriot authorities say that the airspace is still open here for now, though actually quite a few airlines have not been flying here. I think British Airways has cancelled a lot of its flights to Cyprus over recent days because of the drone threat. One drone hit the runway at Akrotiri on Sunday. More drones were intercepted on Monday. Yesterday there was no activity of that kind, but clearly it still remains a threat. I think they are coming probably from Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is pretty close by. It's only if you're in a passenger jet, it's only half an hour's flying time from here. Drones would take slightly longer, but I mean, it just goes to show how close Cyprus is to the western edge, the western coast of Lebanon. And that is why the British military is sending a warship here. It's going to take close to a week to get here. They're sending helicopters as well with special anti-drone measures on board, and the French are deploying an aircraft carrier to the eastern Mediterranean as well, all because of that drone threat to this part of the world.
Ali, I just wondered what you've picked up as the mood there of British forces at Akrotiri. We just showed HMS Dragon again in Portsmouth setting off soon. Is there a sense that they feel exposed in the short term? It kind of seems extraordinary that our airbase is needing extra protection.
Yeah, it doesn't have any protection against ballistic missile threat. I mean, they do have layers of air defences, but, Britain has, pretty meagre air defence capability when you compare it to, say, the Americans, the Israelis, for example. It is not a part of the British military that is quite as advanced as some of its allies. And so, yeah, I think there is a feeling of being somewhat exposed here. I mean, this is a base that also houses American personnel, has done for many, many years, and so the fact it has become a target. By the way, I should say, the drones that came here this morning, there's no suggestion whether they were targeting Akrotiri or possibly elsewhere on the island. There is another military base over at Decalia as well, so we don't know what they were targeting, but the fact that this base has become a target, given its proximity to what's going on, given that it's got American personnel on board, and the fact is the Iranians see Britain really as, only worse only to America and Israel. So it's no real surprise that it's being targeted.
Ali, thank you very much indeed. Ali Bunkel reporting for us there from Cyprus. Now, there have been a lot of explosions in the last hour or so in Lebanon. Israel has also said it has launched a wave of strikes in Iran as well. We can talk now to our lead world news presenter, Yalda Hakim, who's in Jerusalem for us. Yalda, we're just getting reports through saying that members of Iran's Assembly of Experts, the guys tasked with appointing a new leader, say they're close to a decision. That's state TV. I just wondered if you could, I guess, talk a little bit about what next.
Yeah, absolutely, Sophie. Good morning to both of you. They are in the process of selecting the new supreme leader after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in that strike on Saturday. And the front runner at the moment is his son, Mujtaba Khamenei, who's 56 years old. Now, Mujtaba's name over the last few years has come up a number of times as the potential successor to his father. But in recent times, that kind of went away, especially because many of the protesters who came out onto the streets directed their anger towards the son of the supreme leader. He's a mid-ranking cleric. He was taught and learnt in the seminaries in Qom, but he's also believed to be incredibly close to the Revolutionary Guard, who are apparently pushing behind the scenes for him to take this particular position. Now, he himself, for many years, apparently was opposed to just succeeding his father and wanted a proper process to be pushed through. But he will, if he is appointed, be in charge of both the religious sects as well as the political sectors, and, of course, be the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Guard and the armed forces. So we may get more information about that in the coming hours. This evening, the official mourning period for the Supreme Leader will begin, and his body will be out for 3 days before it is buried. So that process is continuing, which really just gives you a sense of how swiftly they've moved since coming under attack on Saturday.
Yalda, in terms of the sort of scale of what Israel is doing in terms of the offensive, we've been out with John Sparks multiple times this morning in Beirut. Are they kind of really expanding their operations offensively now? And I guess with it, what guidance do we have or hope do we have that anything kind of peaks and starts to calm down anytime soon?
Well, you would have heard the Omani foreign minister calling for a ceasefire. No doubt he's talking closely to the Iranians as well. He was one of the Omani foreign minister was one of the chief negotiators during the nuclear talks that were taking place over the course of the last few weeks before the war kicked off. But the Israelis, the Americans, continue to say that this operation, this campaign will continue for a number of weeks. When I've spoken to the Israeli security establishment, they've said we roughly need a couple of weeks and we have thousands of targets. They've gone heavily in the last 24 hours after many of the sites of the Revolutionary Guard and their militia group, the Basij, who were instrumental in cracking down on those protesters on January the 8th and 9th. So they have many, many targets. Just in the first 24 hours of the campaign, the Israelis dropped 2,000 munitions across Iran, and we know that the Americans say that they've also dropped several thousand as well, targeting thousands of sites. And they say this is just the very beginning. We've heard that from Donald Trump as well. But at the same time, I've been speaking to experts both on and off the record who say that the idea of the escalation and the way in which it has escalated across the Gulf states, for example, and as you say, to Lebanon as well, it's not something that they necessarily anticipated to this degree. When I've spoken to diplomats across the Gulf, they have conceded that there are gaps in their air defenses as well. I mean, the Iranians are sending very cheap drones, that are worth about $35,000, taking, and these interceptors are worth millions. So that's where the conundrum is as well.
Yalda, always so good to talk, and thank you for coming on mornings today as well. We'll no doubt be speaking soon. Thank you.
Now, Spain's Prime Minister has doubled down on his opposition to the US and Israel strikes on Iran.
So we've been talking a lot about Keir Starmer and the fact that Donald Trump is, let's say, not very happy about the fact he didn't back his action immediately. Well, he's even angrier with the Spaniards. We can bring in Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins, who's here to tell us more. Siobhan, what's happening with Spain?
Well, as you say, Sophie, Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, firmly in the doghouse in Donald Trump's eyes. But to be frank, according to his televised address that he's made this morning, he doesn't really seem to care. To give people a bit of background to this, after Israel and the US started these strikes on Iran, it felt like for a few days that Spain was a lone voice in the EU questioning the legality of it. And then on Monday, we heard that the Spanish had said that the US couldn't use some of their bases to launch some of their operations. Now, that has clearly really annoyed Donald Trump, who yesterday, ahead of a meeting with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz essentially threatened Spain with a trade war, saying that he could cut them off. Now, today, as I said, the Spanish Prime Minister's gone on telly, and to sum it up, his message to the US is no to war. He said to the people listening, no to the breakdown of international law, no to assuming that the world can solve its problems through conflicts involving bombs, and finally, no to repeating the mistakes of the past. Now, he said by standing up for the international rule of law, he wasn't backing the Ayatollahs. That isn't the case. But he called, he said, on Iran, Israel and the US to stop. He mentioned that 23 years ago, the US pulled, in his words, the world into a conflict in the Middle East, which had long-lasting ramifications. He's asked that that does not happen again. So very clear, Spain is staying on course. There have been voices of support from the EU Commission, for example, with him today. We've also heard Emmanuel Macron, the French president, yesterday saying that they couldn't really back the legality of these strikes either, but a much softer position. So tensions continuing between Spain and the US.
Siobhan, I'm really interested how that press conference went down in the Oval Office yesterday there in continental Europe, because obviously we were all glued to it, in particular relating to the remarks towards Prime Minister Starmer. The comments towards Pedro Sanchez and Spain, as you've already been reflecting on, were much harsher, and there was Chancellor Merz in the room. I mean, I'm really interested if there's annoyance across Europe that he didn't do more in the moment. I think he even sort of implicitly criticised Spain by saying that, yes, they should be spending the NATO minimum of 2% on defence, and they're not. So it was yet again an extraordinary Oval Office press conference. I just wondered how some of those details went down.
Wasn't it? So at the time, if people didn't see that news conference, when Donald Trump was laying into Spain and saying that he might cut them off, Friedrich Merz didn't really say anything. And then when he was picked up on it, he didn't wade into the criticism about Spain's stance on Iran, but he did say that they were trying to negotiate with Spain to up their contributions to NATO. Now, there has been criticism. We've heard from sources in Spain that they are really annoyed with the stance that Friedrich Merz took. One source told us Merz has an attitude not befitting a European leader who defends the unity of his partners. Now, in his own defence, after he'd met Donald Trump, Friedrich Merz took some questions from reporters on the ground, and they asked him about that, like, why didn't you defend him? And he said that he didn't see the point in escalating or prolonging the debate in a public forum. But he said that behind closed doors, he reminded Donald Trump that Spain is an EU member. And so if there was a trade war against them, they're actually part of bloc. So any decision had to be against the EU as a whole. So his stance is, I did stand up for both the UK and Spain behind closed doors. There was no point in having a huge public fight with Donald Trump, which you can kind of see the reasoning for if you think back to the Zelensky White House moments. However, the Spanish are not impressed.
I can imagine. Siobhan, thank you very much indeed.
We're going to have a quick look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The south and east look mostly fine into next week, while northern and western parts will see rain at times. There's already a little rain for parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland. Most other places, though, look dry. England and Wales will see early low cloud and fog slowly lifting this morning to leave plenty of sunshine by lunchtime. The East Midlands, the Welsh Marches and southwest England will remain grey the longest. Elsewhere, it'll stay rather cloudy with patchy rain becoming confined to Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll be warmer than yesterday, but the wind will pick up.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up, I'm going to speak to one of my heroes, actually. The guy behind a kids' TV show that I think is one of the best fun and educational things on telly at the minute.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right. We're going to get in. Right. Get in, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. The next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Okay, but
Listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Now it's World Book Day tomorrow. If you are a parent of a child aged between 4 and 11, I do not need to tell you that. It's probably, I mean, it's gorgeous, but it is also one of the most stressful days on the calendar for parents as well, because kids, young people, have to go into school often dressed up as a character from a book. I mean, the idea is to try and get them reading more, right?
And I think it's obviously caught on significantly in recent years, which is a great way to encourage kids to... My son's not old enough to do this quite yet, but I think he's going to get really into it.
Oh, it's the big thing. And to commemorate World Book Day, we're going to also be talking, I'm quite excited to the authors Michael Morpurgo and also Lucy Worsley tomorrow, 2 absolutely brilliant authors, Michael Morpurgo in particular, an absolute giant of children's publishing, of course. But the most important thing is if your kids... your grandkids, or maybe you yourself, maybe you want to dress up for World Book Day. If you're doing it tomorrow, please send us your pictures, scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can email us at mornings@sky.uk as well.
I'm currently reading the memoir of former Goldman Sachs CEO, so it's like I've already dressed up. I actually am reading that book. Lloyd Blankfeins book, which is really good, by the way. I've got him coming up on the podcast. So I actually literally fit in perfectly.
Well, this is great. You can send a picture of yourself in your suit for your, yeah, amazing.
I'm coming in as per the book that I'm reading.
There you go.
Who decides world days? How do we...
I don't know.
A World Day?
I don't know. If you do know that, you can also email us in to let us know. Linked into this, really, is a new report on children's TV programming. This is a very important story, I think, because what it's effectively showing is a big decline in investment to quality UK-based children's television programming. And one of our guests coming up now is someone who I'm very excited by, Ollie Hyatt, who for me is the absolute master of educational kids TV programming, the lead producer of the kids TV series Number Blocks. Great to have you with us. So just talk us through this report firstly. How worried are you about a decline in quality kids TV?
Well, I am worried, but this report is just the tip of an iceberg from a very long line of reports from about 1999 saying that children's content is declined. So it's no new news to me, but it's great to have Patricia and the BBC recognising it and help us get the profile children's content deserves.
I just want to talk a bit about Number Blocks, because I'm going to fangirl a little bit here, but I think Number Blocks is brilliant because it is A, really educational, and B, it's enjoyable, it's fun, it's got music, it's got characters, it's got stories, it's very, very smart TV. How difficult is it to produce that kind of kids' viewing experience when you've got things like YouTube, grabbing their attention in all the ways it can?
Yeah, it's very easy to come up with those ideas, and those ideas exist, and the BBC do commission them. But the problem that we've had over the years, as you can read in the report, is the funding for those programmes has reduced, both on the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and Sky itself has now stopped commissioning programmes. So the great ideas and the great industry that produces those in this country could make more and more of that. And those shows are having a genuine impact on children's lives and education and changing many children's attainment. But the risk that this report shows is that the funding to get these things going is disappearing at an alarming rate and has been for 25 years.
Is new media, whether that's YouTube or the many other platforms available, an opportunity, though, to produce great children's content and to distribute it to people?
The reality of the situation with YouTube is that it is not a curated children's media platform. So people have had issues with the safety on there and also the sort of content they're being served. You have to remember, YouTube is a business and we shouldn't punish it for that, but it is essentially an attention algorithm, which means that they make money if children watch more and more and more. So what it isn't doing, in my view, is positioning the very best content in front of our children. I'm sure I'm a parent myself, and I have to have those conversations. Please turn off YouTube Shorts, the scrolling. So people like the BBC and the other public service broadcasters, or people providing that sort of more healthy, nourishing, the vegetables of content that children need, they need funding correctly, and their content needs to be found. So if you look at the report again, Patricia talks about prominence, and I don't want just prominence for the BBC or public service content. I want for public service broadcasters. I want it for all public service content.
I'm interested when you're talking about YouTube there, because obviously Number Blocks, Alpha Blocks, etc., you can find these kind of things on YouTube. But I guess the issue, and we discussed this on Cheat Sheet, is that the other thing that you can find on YouTube is pretty mindless but very grabby content. So like bright colours, quick jump cuts. Is it a battle for kids' attention?
It is. I mean, the way I always look at it is water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. There is enough good content out there on YouTube, but how do children find it? How is it signposted? So the very sensible suggestions of some sort of prominence for, in the UK, for culturally relevant good stuff. I look at it as like a shop.
I'm so sorry. I found this so interesting. I've completely lost track of time. I'm going to be completely honest. And so I'm going to have to cut you up because we're going to an ad break. But thank you so much for coming on. Cheers. It's much appreciated.
Sky News Today is up after this.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.